Hey guys, just want to say thanks for tuning in to Wide Awake Horror today. Today we've got some true horror stories for you guys to hear. Now, if you enjoy these stories, as always, please smash that like button. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the family. Now, let's enjoy some new stories.
I almost didn't go. That's the part that still messes with me the most. If my phone battery had died earlier, or if my mom had asked me to grab groceries, or if it had started raining like the forecast said it would, I probably wouldn't have been standing in that parking lot at 7:12 p.m., checking my reflection in the dark window of a closed pet store. But it didn't rain. My phone stayed alive, and I went. I met her on a dating app that I'd only downloaded because my friend wouldn't stop clowning me about being single. Her profile was normal. Brown hair, wide smile, a couple pictures at what looked like a pumpkin patch. Her bio said she liked old horror movies and diner food at 2 a.m. Nothing weird. We'd been messaging for about a week. She was funny in a dry way, sent voice notes sometimes. Her voice sounded soft, kind of breathy. Normal girl stuff. We agreed to meet at this outdoor shopping plaza on the edge of town. It's the kind of place that looks busy in the daytime but turns weirdly empty at night. Half the stores were already closed when I got there. The sky was that ugly gray-blue color, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to be night yet. I saw her before she saw me. She was standing near the fountain in the middle of the plaza. The water was off, so it was just this dry concrete bowl with old coins scattered at the bottom. She was wearing a light blue sweater and jeans. Her hair was down. She looked exactly like her pictures. I walked up, heart pounding in that awkward first date way. She turned toward me, smile huge, like we'd known each other for years. And then she said, "Thanks for coming back." Not hi. Not nice to finally meet you. Thanks for coming back. I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. Like maybe she meant coming back to the app after deleting it or something. But she didn't laugh. She just kept smiling. It wasn't creepy yet. Just off. I told her we never met before. I was pretty sure of that. I don't forget faces easily, especially not ones I've been texting all week. She tilted her head a little, still smiling, and said that was funny, like I was the one being weird. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. I didn't hug back right away. It caught me off guard. She smelled like vanilla body spray. Normal. Real. Her arms were warm around me. She held on just a second too long. When she pulled away, she looked relieved, like she'd been worried I wouldn't show up. We started walking around the plaza. Most of the stores were dark, their metal gates pulled down. She kept glancing at me like she was checking something, like making sure I matched a memory she had. I told her again, joking that she was making me feel like I'd lost my memory or something. She just shrugged and said people forget things all the time. That was the first moment I felt that small drop in my stomach. We ended up sitting on a bench near the fountain. She started bringing up stuff we'd supposedly done together. She mentioned a movie theater downtown that closed last year. Said we'd gone there on a Tuesday because tickets were cheaper. She even described the shirt I was wearing that day. Black hoodie with a red stripe on the sleeve. I own a black hoodie with a red stripe. But I've never been to that theater with her. I've only been there once in my life, and it was with my cousin. I told her she must have gone with someone else. She shook her head slowly, smiling like she felt bad for me. Said I always did this, that I always pretended not to remember after. After what? She didn't answer that part. My chest started feeling tight. I checked my phone, thinking maybe I'd somehow matched with her before and forgot. But our chat history only went back a week. Nothing older. She reached over and touched my arm. She said I was doing it again. I asked doing what? She said pretending this was the first time. That's when I noticed something else. She wasn't asking questions about me. Not really, she wasn't trying to get to know me. She was talking like she already knew everything. I asked her how many times we'd supposedly met. She thought about it, tapping her chin like she was counting. 3. She said this was the 4th. I laughed again, but it came out then. She started describing the second time we met. Said we went to this abandoned warehouse by the river. Said I showed her a room inside with old mattresses stacked against the wall. Said we carved our initials into one of the wooden beams. I've never been inside that warehouse. Everyone in town knows about it. It's fenced off. People say it's dangerous. I told her that. She frowned slightly for the first time, just for a second. Then a smile came back. She said it was always so funny. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. It was just a spam email, but for a split second I thought it was someone warning me about her. I asked her if she could show me proof, like photos of us together. She said she didn't keep photos. Said I asked her not to. That made my throat dry. I don't ask people not to keep photos. We got up and started walking again. She suggested we go somewhere more private like last time. I asked what happened last time. She looked confused, then sad. She said I left. Just left her there. In the warehouse. I stopped walking. She kept going a few steps before realizing I wasn't beside her anymore. She turned around slowly. The parking lot felt way bigger now. Darker. The taco place had closed without me noticing. Its lights were off. I asked her why she would come back here if I supposedly left her somewhere dangerous. She said because she knew I'd feel bad and come back eventually. And there it was again. Come back. My head started racing. What if she had me confused with someone else? Maybe a guy who looked like me. Maybe she was projecting some weird theme onto me. But then she said something that made my stomach drop all the way. She mentioned my old house. The one I moved out of 2 years ago. She described the cracked driveway, the tree in the front yard that leaned too far to the left. She said she hated that tree because it made the yard look uneven. I'd never posted pictures of that house online. I asked her how she knew about that. She just smiled again, softer this time, almost affectionate. She said she used to sit in her car down the street sometimes, waiting for me to come outside. My ears started ringing. I looked around the parking lot again. The old van with tinted windows was still there. I couldn't see inside it. She followed my eyes and then laughed quietly. She said relax, she didn't bring anyone this time. This time. I took a step back. She stepped forward. I noticed then that her smile wasn't reaching her eyes anymore. Her eyes looked tired, almost irritated. She said she didn't like when I made her feel crazy, that we'd been through too much for me to keep acting like this. I told her we hadn't been through anything. She said that hurt her feelings. The air felt heavy, like before a storm. I pulled out my phone and pretended to check something. Really, I was debating whether to call someone or just run to my car. That's when she said my full name. First and last. I never gave her my last name. Not on the app, not in the messages. She said it slowly, like she liked how it sounded. Then she said she still had the key. I froze. Key to what? She tilted her head again, same way she did earlier. To my old house. I moved out 2 years ago, yeah, but my parents still own it. It's rented out now. I asked her how she'd get a key. She said I gave it to her the third time. The third time. I started walking toward my car without saying anything. I didn't run, but I walked fast. She followed, not rushing, just keeping pace. She said not to leave her again. Said last time was hard enough. I reached my car and unlocked it. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my keys once. She stopped a few feet away. Her face changed completely. The smile disappeared. She looked tired, disappointed. She said I promised I wouldn't forget her again. I got in the car and locked the doors immediately. She just stood there, staring at me through the window. No manging, no screaming, just staring. Then she mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, obviously, but I could read it. See you at home. I spat out of that parking lot so fast I almost hit a curb. I didn't go to my current house. I drove straight to my parents' old place. I don't even know why. Panic, maybe. When I pulled up, every light inside was off. The driveway was empty, but the front door was slightly open. Just barely. Like someone had closed it without making sure it latched. I sat in my car staring at it for a full minute. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from her. Just one line. Thanks for coming back. I should have canceled the second he said he'd rather pick me up. I don't even know why that bothered me so much at first. It's normal, right? Guy offers to drive. Saves gas. Feels polite. But something about how he said it, like it wasn't really an offer, just a decision already made, stuck with me. I almost typed that I'd just meet him at the place, but he'd already asked for my address and already sent it before my brain caught up. It wasn't even a fancy date, just some new 24-hour diner by the highway that everyone was posting about. Cheap milkshakes, bright lights, open late. I thought it would be safe, public, loud. I remember standing in my bedroom before he arrived, looking at the window. I changed my curtains that morning. The old ones were thin and white and kind of see-through at night. I'd gotten new ones last week, dark green, thicker. I put them up mostly because I was tired of feeling like the apartment across from mine could see straight into my room when my lights were on. I didn't think about it again. He pulled up exactly at 8:03 p.m. I know the time because I was staring at my phone pretending not to be nervous. His car was a silver sedan. Clean, not new, but not junky either. He texted that he was outside. I locked my door, double-checked it like I always do, and walked down the stairs of my building. I live on the 3rd floor of this old brick apartment complex near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just basic. He got out when he saw me and smiled. He looked like his pictures. Brown hair, light stubble, average height. Normal. He hugged me quickly, nothing weird, and opened the passenger door for me. The inside of his car smelled like laundry detergent and something minty. The seats were leather, slightly cracked. There was a water bottle in the cup holder and a pair of sunglasses on the dashboard. I buckled my seatbelt. He got in and started the car. And before he even pulled away from the curb, he looked at me and asked why I had changed my curtains. I honestly thought I misheard him. I asked what he meant. He glanced from my building, then back at me like he was confused why I was confused. He said last week they were white. My brain went blank for a second. I'd only been talking to him for 5 days. We never met before. I told him I just felt like changing them. He nodded slowly like that made sense, but he kept staring at my building in the rearview mirror as he drove off. I tried to play it cool. Maybe he'd driven by before. Maybe he had friends in the area. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he was guessing. But he didn't guess the color. He knew they were white. I asked how he knew what my old curtains looked like. He shrugged and said he notices things. That was it. The drive to the diner was about 15 minutes. I spent most of it staring out the window, pretending to watch the streetlights. He kept making small talk about work, about traffic, about how the diner supposedly had milkshakes for $6 each that were huge. But every few minutes, he'd bring up something about my place. He mentioned the little crack in the sidewalk in front of my building, said he almost tripped on it once. Once. I asked when he'd been there before. He said just around. Around when? He smiled like it was funny. I started replaying our messages in my head. He never said anything that weird. He seemed normal, maybe a little intense, but nothing crazy. We pulled into the diner parking lot. It was packed. Neon lights buzzing, cars everywhere, people standing outside waiting for tables. The noise should have made me feel better. It didn't. Inside, it was bright and loud. Music playing from an old jukebox in the corner. Servers weaving through tight spaces with trays of fries and burgers. We got a booth near the back. For the first 10 minutes, everything felt almost okay. We ordered food. He talked about his job at some shipping warehouse. I nodded along, trying to relax. Then he mentioned my bedroom, just casually. He said he liked the way my room was set up. I felt my stomach drop so fast, it almost made me dizzy. I asked what he meant. He said the bed against the wall instead of centered looked better. I stopped chewing. I asked how he would know where my bed was. He didn't answer right away. He just took a sip of his drink. Then he said he'd seen it through the window before I changed the curtains. My ears were ringing again like they do when I get really anxious. My apartment is across from another building, not the street. You have to be in the parking lot, angled just right, to see into my window at night, and only if the lights were on. I asked him why he was looking into my window. He laughed softly and said it wasn't like that. He said he just happened to park nearby one night and noticed the light on. Park nearby. One night. I tried to keep my voice steady and asked why he was parked near my building at night before we even met. He said he wanted to make sure I was real. That part made my skin crawl. He said he's been tricked before by fake profiles, so he sometimes checks if the person actually exists. He said it like it was normal, reasonable. I didn't know what to say. Our food came, and I barely touched it. He ate like nothing was wrong. Fries dipped in ketchup, milkshake almost gone already. He started talking about how I keep my bathroom light on sometimes after midnight. I don't. At least, I don't think I do. He said it flickers a little. I felt cold all over. I asked how many times he'd been near my building. He said not that many, just a few evenings. A few evenings. We matched 5 days ago. I asked why he didn't tell me he'd been around. He said he didn't want to freak me out. That almost made me laugh, except it wasn't funny at all. I told him I needed to use the bathroom and slid out of the booth. My legs felt weak. I walked past the counter, past the blinking neon sign, and locked myself in a stall. I pulled out my phone and checked my front door camera app. I'd installed a cheap one months ago after someone tried to open my door late at night. It only saves clips for 24 hours unless you pay extra, which I don't. I scrolled back as far as it would let me. Last night, 2:17 a.m. There was a clip. I tapped it. The camera angle only shows my door and part of the hallway. In the video, a shadow moved across the bottom of the frame. Someone standing close to my door. The handle didn't move. They didn't knock. They just stood there for almost a full minute, then walked away. I watched it twice. The shape looked tall, broad shoulders. It could have been anyone, but my heart already knew. I went back to the booth. He was smiling when I sat down. He asked if everything was okay. I nodded. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want him to drive me home. I didn't want him to know I was scared. So I forced myself to sit through another 20 minutes. He talked about random stuff, about movies, about how he likes quiet neighborhoods. He mentioned that my street gets really silent after 1 a.m. I didn't respond. When the bill came, he paid $32 total. He said it was his treat. We walked back to the car. The parking lot felt darker than before, even with all the lights. I told him I actually needed to stop by my friend's place before going home. I lied. Said she needed help with something. He looked disappointed for a second, then nodded. He said he could drop me off there. I said she'd pick me up. He paused. Then he asked if I was mad about the curtain thing. I told him it just caught me off guard. He said he just cares. That word made it worse. He drove me back toward my building anyway. I didn't correct him at first because I was too busy thinking. When we turned onto my street, I felt panic rising. I told him to stop at the corner. He asked why. I said I'd walk from there. He hesitated, but he pulled over. I unbuckled and opened the door fast. Before I got out, he said he liked the green curtains better. I didn't turn around. I walked down the sidewalk, pretending to head toward my building. When his car finally drove off, I waited 2 full minutes before running the other direction to my friend's house 3 blocks away. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. The next morning, my landlord called. He said someone had been asking about me. A guy claiming to be my boyfriend, saying he lost his key and needed to be let in. The landlord didn't let him in, but he said the guy knew which apartment was mine. I moved out a week later. I still don't know how long he'd been watching before he ever swiped right. I knew something was off before she even showed me the phone. It wasn't one big thing. It was a bunch of tiny stuff stacking up in my head like receipts I didn't ask for. The way she picked the restaurant without asking what I liked. The way she chose the table in the very back corner like she planned it. The way she kept checking her phone but not typing anything. Still, if you asked me at 6:45 p.m. how the date was going, I would have said fine. Normal. Maybe a little awkward, but first dates usually are. I met her through a mutual friend from work, not a dating app this time, which honestly made me feel safer. My coworker said she was cool, funny, into photography. Her pictures looked normal. Nothing fake. We'd been texting for about a week before meeting up. The restaurant she picked was this low-key Thai place downtown. Not fancy, but dim lighting, candles on tables, that kind of place where you have to lean in to hear each other. It was busy enough to feel public, but quiet enough that you could talk. She got there before me. That should have been my first red flag. I told her I'd be there at 7. I walked in at 6:57, and she was already seated, water glass half empty like she'd been waiting a while. She smiled when she saw me, stood up, hugged me quick. Normal hug. She smelled like citrus shampoo. We sat down, ordered food, started talking. She asked about where I live, which part of town, stuff like that. I didn't think much of it. Everyone asks that. I told her the neighborhood, Mentioned it's an old building but cheap rent, about $900 a month, which is decent for this area. She nodded like she knew exactly where it was. That part stuck in my head, but I let it slide. She talked about her photography hobby. Said she likes shooting urban stuff. Alleyways, staircases, empty parking garages. I joked that my building hallway probably fits the vibe. Ugly brown carpet, flickering lights. She smiled at that. Almost too much. Our food came. Pad thai for me, curry for her. Everything still felt manageable. Just a date, just two people figuring each other out. About halfway through dinner, she stopped mid-sentence, not in a dramatic way, just paused. Then she picked up her phone from beside her plate and unlocked it. I assumed she was going to show me one of her photos. Instead, she slid the phone across the table toward me. I looked down. It took my brain a few seconds to register what I was seeing. It was a live video feed of my apartment hallway. The exact ugly brown carpet, the dent in the wall near the elevator, the exit sign at the end of the corridor that always flickers. I stared at it, waiting for it to glitch, to buffer, to reveal it was some kind of joke or recorded clip. But it wasn't a recording. The timestamp in the corner was current, the little red live icon blinking. Someone walked past the camera in sweatpants and slippers. One of my neighbors from 3 Bits. I recognized him. My stomach dropped so hard it felt physical. I looked up at her. She wasn't smiling. She was just watching me. Calm, curious, like she was studying my reaction. I asked what that was. She said it was my hallway. I said, I know that. I asked how. She tilted her head slightly and said she wanted to show me something interesting. I felt like the air around the table got heavier, like the whole restaurant was suddenly too quiet. I asked her where that camera was. She said near the fire extinguisher cabinet on my floor. That's when my chest started pounding. There is no visible camera there. I'd walked past that cabinet every day for 2 years. I asked how long it had been there. She didn't answer right away. She just got a sip of her drink. Then she said long enough. My hands were sweating. I picked up her phone to look closer. The angle was slightly tilted, like it was hidden inside something. Maybe inside the ceiling vent. I zoomed in, and the image pixelated but stayed live. Someone stepped out of the elevator. The doors opened and closed in real time. I could see my apartment door at the very edge of the frame. I asked if she was hacking into the building cameras. She shook her head. She said my building doesn't have hallway cameras. That's true. I checked when I first moved in. I asked if she installed it. She smiled a little at that. Not proud, not ashamed. Just like it was obvious. She said she wanted to feel closer to me before we met. My brain couldn't even process that sentence. We hadn't met before tonight. We'd only been texting. I asked how she got into my building. She said it's not that hard. Someone always holds the door. I thought about the times I'd seen random people in the stairwell, assumed they were guests. My appetite was completely gone. She reached across the table and gently took her phone back. The live feed was still going. She tapped something and switched to another camera. This one was inside. My apartment. I recognized my living room instantly, the cheap gray couch, the lamp with a crooked shade, my two mounted slightly too low. The angle was high, like from a smoke detector. I stopped breathing for a second. I asked how that was possible. She said she's good with tech. That answer felt too small for what I was seeing. The camera feed showed my empty couch. The clock on the wall said 7:42 p.m. Exact time. She zoomed in slightly. My bedroom door was visible down the hall. Closed. I felt exposed in a way I can't even explain. I asked how long that had been there. She said since last weekend. Last weekend I was out of town visiting my brother. My apartment had been empty. That means she went in while I was gone. I asked how she got a key. She said she didn't need one. My door has a keypad lock. I felt my pulse in my ears. I asked how she got the code. She shrugged and said most people use dates that matter to them. My code was my birthday. I must have mentioned it in passing over text. I tried to remember if I ever did. Maybe when she asked when my birthday was. I probably told her. My mind was racing through every message we'd sent. She turned the phone back toward herself and locked it, like she'd just shown me a vacation picture. I asked what she wanted. She said she just didn't like surprises. She said she wanted to know who she was talking to before she committed time to meeting in person. So she watched. For a week. She described my routine. How I come home around 6 on weekdays. How I sometimes leave the TV on even when I'm in the kitchen. How I pace my non-phone calls. She said it all casually, like she was listing hobbies. I looked around the restaurant. Everyone else was just eating, laughing, completely unaware that my entire apartment had been turned into a surveillance project. I asked if anyone else had access to the cameras. She said no. Just her. I didn't believe that. I asked if she'd ever been inside while I was there. She didn't answer that. She just smiled faintly. That was worse than any answer. I stood up. I didn't care about being polite anymore. I said I was leaving. She didn't try to stop me. She just said I should probably change my keypad code. Like it was helpful advice. I walked out of that restaurant and straight to my car. I didn't go home. I drove to the nearest electronics store that was still open and bought a new door lock for $180. Then I called my landlord from the parking lot and told him everything. He didn't fully believe me until I sent him screenshots I'd managed to take when she wasn't looking. He agreed to let me change the locks. When I finally got back to my building, my hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the new lock. I took the elevator up. The hallway looked normal. Empty. But I couldn't see it the same anymore. I walked to the fire extinguisher cabinet. I looked up at the ceiling vent above it. There was a tiny black dot in the corner. Barely noticeable. I stood there staring at it for a full minute. Then I pulled out my phone and took a picture. My phone buzzed immediately. A text from her. Just 3 words. Nice picture angle. I looked back at the vent. The red light blinked once. I knew it was going to be weird when he sent me a picture of a ring before we even met. Not a ring for me. Just a random ring he saw at a mall kiosk. He said it reminded him of something. I didn't ask what. I thought he was just awkward and trying too hard to be romantic or funny. We'd only been talking for 3 days at that point. I figured some guys just come on strong and then calm down in person. I should have trusted my gut then. We matched on a dating app, one of the more serious ones where people write long bios about wanting something real. His profile said he was 29, worked in real estate, wanted to settle down soon. His pictures were clean. Button-up shirts, nice smile, a golden retriever in one photo. He seemed intense over text, but not scary. He'd send long paragraphs about his future plans. House in the suburbs, 2 kids, a dog. I thought it was kind of a lot, but at least he was honest about what he wanted. We decided to meet at his upscale Italian place downtown. Not crazy fancy, but definitely not cheap. He picked it. He said it was important to him that our first meeting felt meaningful. That word stuck with me. I almost canceled that afternoon. I don't know why exactly. I just felt heavy about it. I told myself I was overthinking. So I got dressed, did my hair, and drove to the restaurant. He was already inside when I got there. The place was dim, soft yellow lighting, low music, the kind of place where couples celebrate anniversaries. I felt slightly underdressed, even though I wore a decent outfit. He stood up when he saw me and smiled like he just won something. He hugged me and held on a second too long. Not long enough to make a scene, just long enough to feel intentional. We sat down. The waiter came over almost immediately with menus and water. And that's when it happened. Without hesitating, without even glancing at me, he introduced me as his fiancée. I genuinely thought I misheard him. The waiter smiled politely and congratulated us. I laughed awkwardly, expecting him to correct it. He didn't. He just smiled bigger. I leaned toward him slightly and said that was funny. He looked confused. Said what was funny. I said the fiancé thing. He said it wasn't funny. My stomach tightened. I said we just met. He waved his hand like that detail didn't matter. The waiter was still standing there, clearly uncomfortable, but trying to stay professional. I said we're on our first date. He didn't respond to that. He just ordered a bottle of wine, $68, Didn't ask if I even wanted wine. The waiter nodded and walked away. I felt heat rising in my face, embarrassment mixed with something else I couldn't name yet. I asked him why he said that. He said because that's what I am. I told him I'm not. He smiled at me like I was being playful, like I was in on a joke that I didn't know about. He said he doesn't believe in wasting time. Said when he knows, he knows. We had been sitting at that table for maybe 3 minutes. I tried to laugh it off. I told him he barely knows me. He said he knows enough. Then he started listing things about me. Where I went to college. My major. The coffee shop I go to on weekends. I felt a slow cold creep up my spine. I asked how he knew about the coffee shop. He said I posted about it once. I don't remember posting the name of it. Maybe I did. Maybe I tagged the location once. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me like he was proud of himself. He said he likes to be thorough. The wine came. The waiter poured it for both of us, still smiling politely. He congratulated us again. This time I corrected him. I said we're not engaged. The waiter looked between us awkwardly. He laughed and said she's shy. I felt my chest tighten. I said again that we just met. He put his hand over mine on the table. His grip wasn't painful, but it was firm. He said sometimes people need time to adjust to good news. I pulled my hand back. He didn't like that. His smile didn't disappear, but his eyes changed. They went flat. The rest of dinner felt like performance I didn't agree to be part of. Every time the waiter came by, he referred to me as his fiancée again, talked about wedding venues, joked about how stressed I've been with planning. The waiter laughed nervously, probably thinking we were doing some weird bit. I kept correcting it. He kept ignoring it. At one point, he pulled out his phone and showed me a picture of a house. A real estate listing. He said this would be perfect for us. I stared at him. Us. He talked about how the backyard would be great for kids, how the master bedroom had enough space for a king bed and a crib. I told him to slow down. He said he's already been slow. That confused me. I asked what that meant. He said he's been watching me for months before messaging me. My heart started pounding in my ears. He said he saw me at the grocery store once, recognized me from mutual friends on social media, said he didn't want to come off weird, so he waited for the right moment to reach out. Months. He'd been building a version of me in his head for months. I suddenly felt like I wasn't on a date. I was in something he'd already scripted. Dessert menus came. He ordered for both of us without asking. He said chocolate is my favorite. It is. I never told him that. I don't even think it's on my profile. I asked how he knew. He shrugged and said it was obvious. It's not obvious. When the waiter came back again, he congratulated us a third time, said he hopes the wedding goes well. This time I didn't correct him. I was tired. I just wanted to leave. When the bill came, it was over $140. He paid without blinking. He stood up and helped me with my coat like we were actually a couple. As we walked toward the exit, he put his hand on the small of my back. I moved slightly away. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. I told him I needed to drive myself home. He looked confused. He said I always let him drive. My throat went dry. I asked what he meant. He said last time we went out, I didn't mind. There was no last time. I said this is our first date. He stared at me for a long second. Then he smiled again. That same patient smile. He said I get nervous and forget things when I'm overwhelmed. I stepped back. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a joke box. It was real. Velvet. He opened it. Inside was a ring. Simple. Silver band with a small diamond. Not huge. Not flashy. Real enough. He said he didn't want to wait any longer. My head felt like it was buzzing. Cars were passing behind him. People walking in and out of the restaurant like this was a normal night. I told him this wasn't real. He looked hurt. He said it's very real to him. I turned around and walked to my car. He didn't chase me. He just stood there holding the ring box. I got in, locked the doors, and drove off. My phone buzzed before I even reached the end of the block. A message from him. He said he understands cold feet. Then another. He said the wedding date is flexible. I blocked him. 2 days later, a bouquet of flowers showed up at my apartment building. No card. Just a small tag with my name and his last name written after it. Like it was already official. I don't think I've ever regretted something as simple as pressing a power button. It sounds dramatic when I say it like that, but that's honestly how it feels. Like my entire night split into two versions. Before I turned my phone off, and after. I met her through a hiking group online. Not even a dating app. Just a local page where people post trails and weekend plans. She commented on one of my photos from a cliff overlook about an hour outside the city. Said she liked the angle and asked if I'd go back sometime. We started messaging after that. It felt normal. She was into nature, photography, camping. Said she liked unplugging from everything for a while. I thought that was kind of cool. Different from the usual bar and movie routine. When she suggested our first date be a short sunset hike, I didn't think twice. It was a popular trail. Not isolated. Maybe a 40-minute loop with a wooden lookout at the top. People bring dogs there. Families go on weekends. We agreed to meet at the trailhead parking lot around 6 p.m. I got there a little early. The lot was half full. The sun was already starting to dip behind the trees, making everything look golden. I leaned against my car scrolling through my phone while I waited. She pulled up in a dark green SUV, older model but clean. She got out smiling, waved at me like we'd known each other longer than we had. She looked like her pictures. Brown hair and a low ponytail, hiking boots, oversized hoodie. Nothing strange, just outdoorsy. We did the quick awkward first hug and started walking toward the trail entrance. At first, everything was fine. We talked about work, about random trips we'd taken, about how annoying city traffic is. She walked slightly ahead of me most of the time, like she already knew the path. About 10 minutes in, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably just a notification. I didn't check it. She glanced back at me when it buzzed. Then she slowed down so we were walking side by side. She asked if I'd mind turning my phone off. Just like that. I laughed and said why. She said she likes being fully present. That phones ruin moments, that it makes her anxious knowing someone could interrupt. I said I could just put it on silent. She shook her head. She said off feels better. There was something in her tone. Not aggressive, just firm, like this mattered more than it should. I hesitated for maybe 3 seconds. Then I pulled it out and held down the power button. The screen went black. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I didn't want to seem rude. Maybe because it was just a phone, and we were only hiking for like an hour. When I looked up, she was smiling. But it wasn't just a normal smile. It was relief. Like she'd been holding her breath waiting for that exact moment. We kept walking. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. Fewer people. The trail narrowed. The trees blocked out most of the light. I told myself it was just because it was getting later. She started asking more specific questions. What time do you usually get home from work? Do you live alone? Do you tell people when you're out hiking? I answered casually at first, then I started noticing the pattern. Every question was about whether someone would notice if I wasn't reachable. I tried to keep it light. Said my roommate would probably assume I was just out late, even though I don't have a roommate anymore. He moved out 2 months ago. I don't know why I lied. Maybe instinct. We reached a fork in the trail. The main path goes right, wide and well-worn. She turned left. That path was narrower, less maintained. I asked if that was the way to the lookout. She said it was a shortcut. I didn't remember a shortcut. I'd hiked this trail twice before, but I followed her. The trees felt thicker on that side, the ground uneven. No other hikers in sight. I started to feel stupid for turning my phone off. After about 15 minutes, we still hadn't reached the lookout. I said something about how long this shortcut was. She said we're almost there. Her tone was different now, less casual, more focused. We finally reached a small clearing. Not the lookout. Just an open patch surrounded by trees. There was no wooden platform, no railing, No view. Just dirt and a fallen log. She stopped in the middle of it and turned to face me. She asked if I trusted her. That question always feels loaded. I said, I guess. She stepped closer. I noticed then that her sub keys were clipped to her belt, and attached to the keychain was something else. A small folding knife. Not unusual for hiking, but it caught my eye. She asked if anyone knew exactly where I was. I said the trail is public. She said that's not what she asked. My heart started beating harder. I said my friend knew I was hiking. Another lie. She studied my face like she was trying to see if I was telling the truth. Then she looked around the clearing, and that's when I saw it. Off to the side, partially hidden behind a tree, was a camera on a tripod, pointed directly at the center of the clearing. My stomach dropped. I asked what that was. She said she likes documenting moments. I asked what kind of moments. She didn't answer directly. She said people are most honest when they feel disconnected, when they think no one can reach them. I suddenly felt very aware of how far we were from the parking lot, how quiet it was, how my phone was completely off. She walked over to the tripod and adjusted the angle slightly. The camera was already recording, red light blinking. I asked what she was doing. She said she wanted to capture something real. I took a step back. She noticed. She asked why I looked nervous. I said this was weird. She tilted her head slightly. Said weird how? I glanced toward the path we came from. It looked darker now. Longer. She walked back toward me slowly. Said I shouldn't overthink things. Said this is what being unplugged feels like. Vulnerable. I said I wanted to head back. She didn't move out of the way. She stood between me and the path. Not aggressively. Just there. She asked me to stay a little longer. Said she planned this carefully. That word stuck. Planned. I looked at the camera again. It wasn't some small handheld thing. It was professional, mounted securely. This wasn't spontaneous. She'd been here before. Maybe more than once. I said I needed to turn my phone back on. She frowned. Actually frowned. Like that disappointed her. She said we agreed to have it off. We didn't agree. She asked. I did it. Big difference. I reached into my pocket anyway and pulled it out. I held the power button. Nothing happened for a second. Then the low battery symbol flashed. 1%. I know for a fact it was over 40% earlier. I always check before going out. I stared at the screen. It died before fully booting up. She was watching me closely. She said sometimes batteries drain faster in the woods. That's not how that works. I felt my throat go dry. I looked past her and noticed something else near the trees. Another bag. Black. Unzipped. Inside, I saw a rope. My brain finally caught up. I didn't say anything. I just moved. I stepped to the side fast, not toward the path but around her. She reacted slower than I expected. I didn't wait. I ran. Branches scratching my arms, uneven ground almost making me trip. I didn't look back. I just followed the faint outline of the trail until I saw the wider main path again. There were 2 hikers walking toward me. Older couple. I must have looked insane because they asked if I was okay. I said yes too fast and kept going. I didn't stop until I reached the parking lot. Her sub was still there, but she wasn't. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my keys twice. I started the engine and drove. As I pulled out, I saw her sub turning into the lot from the opposite direction. She must have taken another path. Our eyes met briefly through the windshields. She wasn't smiling anymore, just staring. That night, I charged my phone and turned it back on. There was one message from her. Sent while it was off. You ruined the moment. I didn't think a simple question about my bedtime would end up replaying in my head for months. It sounds harmless when I say it like that. What time do you usually go to sleep? Normal small talk. The kind of thing people ask when they're trying to figure out if you're a morning person or a night owl. But it wasn't how he asked it. And it definitely wasn't what he did after. I met him at a late night bookstore cafe downtown. It's one of those places that tries to look cozy on purpose. Exposed brick, dim hanging lights, shelves packed tight with used books. They serve coffee and pastries until midnight. It's quiet but not empty. Students with laptops, couples talking low. I liked that it felt public but calm. We matched on a dating app a week before. His profile was simple. Engineer. Into podcasts and cooking, like routine. That word stuck with me even back then. Routine. He was already inside when I got there, sitting at a small round table near the back, close to the nonfiction section. He stood up when he saw me and gave this polite half smile. He looked exactly like his pictures. Neat hair, button-up shirt even though it was casual, watch on his wrist. Not flashy, just organized. We ordered coffee and sat down. At first, it was fine. Normal first date stuff. Where are you from? What do you do, siblings, all that. He listened very closely, almost too closely, like he was filing everything away. I remember noticing how still he was. He didn't fidget, didn't check his phone, just watched me when I talked. About 40 minutes in, after we'd gone through the basic life stories, he started asking more specific questions. What time do you leave for work? How long is your commute? Do you go to the gym on certain days or randomly? I laughed a little and said that sounded like an interview. He smiled faintly and said he just likes understanding patterns. That word again, patterns, routine. Then, casually, like it was nothing, he asked what time I usually go to sleep. I didn't think much of it. I said around 11:30 on weekdays, maybe midnight if I'm not tired. He nodded. Then he looked down at his watch. It was one of those smart watches with a black screen, and he tapped it a few times. I asked what he was doing. He said setting a reminder. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. He turned his wrist slightly and I saw the screen light up. An alarm. Set for 11:30 p.m. Labeled with my name. I felt my stomach tighten. I asked why he did that. He said he likes sensing schedules of people he cares about. We had known each other in person for less than an hour. I told him that was kind of intense. He said not really, just practical. He said now he'd know when I was winding down for the night. I didn't like the way that sounded. I tried to brush it off, but the mood shifted for me after that. Every time he glanced at his watch, I felt aware of it. Like that tiny screen now had a connection to my private life. We talked for another half hour. He asked about my apartment. I told him I live in a small complex about 10 minutes from downtown. He asked what floor. I hesitated but answered second. He asked if I have neighbors above me. I said yes. He asked if they're loud at night. I shrugged and said sometimes. He nodded thoughtfully, like he was calculating something. Around 10:15 p.m., the cafe started emptying out. I said I should probably head home soon. He looked at his watch again. Said that gives him about an hour. An hour for what? He didn't answer that directly. He just stood up and said he'd walk me to my car. Outside, the air was cool and the street was quieter than before. We walked side by side. He didn't try to hold my hand or anything. He kept a small distance between us. But it didn't feel respectful. It felt measured. Like he was staying exactly where he wanted to be. When we reached my car, he stopped and looked at me carefully. He asked if I always park in well-lit areas. I said, yeah, usually. He nodded approvingly. Then he said he likes knowing I'm safe at night. That should have sounded sweet. It didn't. I got into my car and drove off. In my rearview mirror, I saw him still standing there watching. I told myself I was overthinking everything. That he was just organized, maybe a little rigid. I got home around 10:35. My apartment felt normal, quiet, lights off except for the kitchen. I locked the door behind me and changed into pajamas. I made some tea and sat on the couch scrolling through my phone. At exactly 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from him. It said goodnight. No emoji. Just that. I stared at it. I hadn't told him when I actually get into bed. Just that I usually go to sleep around 11:30. The timing was exact. I checked the clock on the stove. 11:30 on the dot. I didn't respond. 2 minutes later, another message. Hope you're tucked in. My chest felt tight. I hadn't told him my apartment number. Just a complex name. I walked quietly to my bedroom and turned off the lights. I don't know why I did that. Maybe instinct. I peeked through the gap in my curtains. The parking lot outside was dim. But I saw a car idling near the entrance. Headlights off. Engine running. I couldn't tell if it was his. It was too dark. My phone buzzed again. Sleep well. I locked my bedroom door, which I never do. The next morning, I woke up to another message sent at 6:45 a.m. Rise and shine. That's the time I usually wake up for work. I'd never told him that. Not directly. Maybe he guessed. Maybe it was coincidence. I tried to tell myself that. I didn't reply all day. Around noon, he sent another message. You didn't respond last night. I left it on red. That evening, around 11:29 p.m., my phone buzzed again. I hadn't even gone to bed yet. Just 1 minute before 11:30. Are you staying up later tonight? I felt a wave of cold run through me. I hadn't posted anything. Hadn't updated my status. There was no way for him to know. Unless he could see. I got up slowly and walked to the window again. This time, the same dark car was parked directly across from my building. Engine off. Lights off. Just sitting there. My phone buzzed at exactly 11:30. Another message. You're still awake. I stepped back from the window so fast I almost tripped. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I changed my schedule. Left work early, went home before sunset. The car wasn't there. I thought maybe it was over. Until my phone buzzed at 11:30 p.m. again. This time, no message. Just a missed call. I blocked his number. The calls stopped. But every night at 11:30, I still wake up, even without an alarm. I didn't even want to go out that night. It had been one of those long weeks where everything feels slightly off. Nothing terrible happened, just small annoying stuff stacking up. Bad sleep. Too much work. My sink leaking for no reason. I almost canceled on her an hour before we were supposed to meet, but I didn't want to seem flaky. She seemed normal over text. Quiet, kind of sarcastic, into art and psychology. Nothing that screamed red flag. If I had stayed home, I wouldn't know my name is sitting in a notebook somewhere under a title that still makes my stomach twist. We met at this weird little art cafe on the edge of the city. Not downtown, not suburban either. Kind of in between warehouses and small offices. The place used to be an old mechanic shop, and they kept some of the industrial look. Concrete floors, metal stools, paintings hanging uneven on brick walls. It wasn't crowded. Maybe 6 other people inside. Soft music playing from hidden speakers. The lighting was dim but warm. She was already there when I walked in. She waved at me from a corner table near a shelf full of random books. She looked exactly like her pictures. Short dark hair, big sweater, ripped jeans. She had this calm expression like nothing ever surprised her. We hugged quickly, sat down. The first half hour was honestly fine. She talked about her job at a small publishing company. I told her about mine. We joked about bad dates we'd had before. She laughed in this quiet way, like she was holding something back. I remember thinking she seemed observant. She'd look at me for a second longer than most people do, like she was studying my face. After we finished our drinks, she asked if I wanted to see something she was working on. I assumed she meant a story or some art project. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a black notebook. It wasn't fancy, just plain. No design on the cover except one word written in pen. Attempts. I noticed the word immediately because the handwriting was careful. Deliberate. I asked what that was. She didn't answer right away. She just ran her fingers over the cover like she was smoothing it out. Then she opened it. The first 2 pages were filled with names. Just first names. Each name written neatly on its own line. Some had little check marks next to them. Some had lines drawn through them. Some had nothing. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I asked what the names were. She said they were people she tried with. Tried what? She smiled faintly and said relationships. I tried to laugh it off. Said that's one way to keep track. She nodded. Said patterns matter. That word again. Patterns. I looked closer at the list. There were a lot of names. Way more than I expected. Not like 5 or 10. More like 30. Some of them had notes scribbled in smaller writing beside them. Too independent. Too distracted. Weak boundaries. Family issues. I felt like I was looking at a research project, not someone's dating history. She flipped a few more pages. Each page had the same title at the top. Attempts. And below names. Organized by date. Some pages had dates from years ago. This wasn't new. This was ongoing. I asked why she called them attempts. She tilted her head slightly. Said because that's what they were. Attempts at getting it right. I didn't like the way she said getting it right. It sounded less romantic and more clinical. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a pen. Same careful handwriting as the cover. She flipped to the last page. There were only 2 names on it so far. No check marks. No notes. Just names. She looked at me. Then slowly wrote mine at the bottom. My first name. Clear. Precise. She didn't rush it. Each letter took its time. I watched the ink sink into the paper like it was final. My throat felt dry. I asked what that meant. She capped the pen and looked up at me calmly. Said it means we'll see. See what? She shrugged slightly. Whether you're a success or another attempt. I tried to joke that this felt intense for a first date. She didn't laugh. She said she takes things seriously. She started flipping back through older pages, pointing out patterns. How certain types of men fail for similar reasons. How some lasted longer but eventually show the same flaws. She talked about them like case studies. One guy was too attached to his mother. Another was inconsistent with communication. Another didn't align with her long-term goals. I asked what happens when someone fails. She paused. Just slightly. Then said she moves on. I asked if she ever stays friends with them. She shook her head. Said once an attempt ends, it's over. The way she said over felt heavier than it should have. I noticed the names had thicker lines drawn through them. Almost carved in. I asked about the check marks. She smiled faintly. Said those lasted more than 6 months. I asked if any made it past a year. She flipped pages slowly. There were 2. Both with notes next to them. Not good notes. Manipulative tendencies. Control issues. The ink around those names looked pressed harder into the page. I asked what happened with them. She closed the notebook halfway. Said they didn't pass. Pass what? She didn't answer. Instead, she asked me what I thought my biggest flaw was. The question caught me off guard. I said I don't know. Maybe I overthink. She nodded like she'd already decided that. Wrote something small next to my name. I didn't see what. My stomach twisted. I asked what she wrote. She said just an observation. I said it's been 1 hour. She said first impressions are important. I started feeling like I was being evaluated instead of dated. Like everything I said was being weighed. She asked about my last relationship. How it ended. Why. How I reacted. She listened carefully. Too carefully. I realized she wasn't responding emotionally. She was collecting data. I looked around the cafe. Everyone else seemed normal, laughing, talking. I felt isolated at that tiny table. She asked if I believe people can change. I said yeah, sometimes. She nodded slowly. Said she believes in refinement. That word hit weird. Refinement. Like sanding down rough edges. I asked what happens if someone doesn't fit her criteria. She looked at me steadily. Said then they become part of the record. My name was already on that record. She closed the notebook gently and slid it back into her bag. Then she smiled like everything was fine. Asked if I wanted to get dessert. I said I actually needed to head out early. She didn't argue, just nodded. As we stood up, she adjusted the strap of her bag carefully, like she was protecting something important. Outside, the air felt cooler than before. She hugged me goodbye, held on a second too long, then said she'd be in touch. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about that notebook, about my name sitting at the bottom of a list of attempts. 2 days later, she texted me. Just one sentence. I've been reviewing my notes. I didn't respond. A week after that, I ran into her at a grocery store. Completely random. She smiled when she saw me, calm as ever. And for a split second, I wondered if there was a new page in that notebook, with my name crossed out. I knew the night was going to be bad when my phone buzzed and I hadn't touched it. That sounds small, but when you're sitting across from someone you barely know and your phone lights up without you even picking it up, your brain notices. I almost canceled on him earlier that day, not because he said anything weird. He actually seemed really chill over text. Worked in marketing, liked cooking, had a dog. We'd been messaging for about a week and nothing stood out as strange. He wasn't overly intense, didn't double text, didn't ask for anything personal too soon. That's probably why what happened felt so much worse. We met at this rooftop taco place downtown. It's on top of a parking garage, kind of hidden, with string lights and picnic tables. Loud music, people laughing, city skyline in the background. The kind of place that feels safe because there's so many people around. He was already there when I arrived, leaning against the railing looking at his phone. He looked like his pictures. Tall, clean haircut, plain black shirt. He smiled when he saw me and gave me a quick hug. We ordered tacos and drinks and grabbed a table near the edge. The view was actually nice. Cars moving below, lights blinking in office buildings. The first 30 minutes were fine. Honestly good. He was funny, sarcastic in a dry way. We joked about bad dating app bios. He asked about my job. I asked about his dog. Normal stuff. At one point, I took my phone out to check the time. It was around 8:40 p.m. I had told my sister I'd text her when I got home, but I wasn't planning on using my phone during the date. I put it face down on the table. He noticed. He asked if I needed to text someone. I said no, just checking the time. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on my phone for a second too long. About an hour in, he said he was going to run to the bathroom. I nodded and took a sip of my drink. As soon as he walked away, I picked up my phone just to scroll for a second. Habit. Nothing serious. No notifications except one from a food delivery app. I didn't text anyone. I didn't open any messages. I just checked the time again. 9:12 p.m. Then I put my phone back down. He was gone for maybe 5 minutes. When he came back, something was off. He wasn't smiling anymore. He sat down slowly, stared at me for a second, then asked why I had texted someone. My brain froze. I said I didn't. He said I did. He said while he was gone, I sent a message. I felt confused more than anything. I told him I didn't text anyone. He leaned forward slightly and said he saw it. I asked how he would see that. He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at me like he was waiting for me to admit something. I picked up my phone and unlocked it. No new messages sent. No open chats. I showed him. He barely glanced at the screen. He said it must have deleted it. That made my stomach tighten. I said, why would I do that? He shrugged and said maybe because I didn't want him to know who I was talking to. The shift in his tone was sudden. He wasn't joking. He sounded genuinely annoyed. I tried to keep my voice calm and said I didn't text anyone. He asked who my emergency contact was. That question came out of nowhere. I asked what that had to do with anything. He said if something happened tonight, who would I call first? I said probably my sister. He nodded slowly. Then he said, so that's who you texted. I felt like I was in a conversation that had skipped 3 steps ahead without me. I opened my messages app again and scrolled through recent chats. Nothing new. I showed him again. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Said it's fine if I don't trust him yet. But lying isn't a good start. Lying. I felt heat rise to my face. I said I'm not lying. He said he knows what he saw. I asked what exactly he saw. He said when he was walking back from the bathroom, he looked up at the reflection in the glass behind me. Apparently from his angle, he could see my phone screen. He said he saw a message threaded open, with a name at the top. He said he saw the typing bubble. My heart started pounding. There was no typing bubble. I hadn't even opened the thread. I asked what name he saw. He hesitated for a second. Then he said a male name. One I don't even know. I told him I don't have anyone by that name in my contacts. He said maybe it was saved under something else. The way he kept insisting felt unreal. Like he decided on a version of reality and was sticking to it. I asked him why he was so sure. He leaned forward again, lowered his voice slightly, said because he's very observant. That word again. Observant. He said he pays attention to details. He described the color of my phone case, the small crack near the camera, the way I tapped my screen twice before locking it. All correct. He had been watching me more closely than I realized. I suddenly felt exposed sitting there under the string lights. People around us laughing, eating, completely unaware. I said even if I had texted someone, why would that matter? We're on a first date. He didn't like that answer. His jaw tightened slightly. He said it matters because he doesn't compete. Compete with who? I asked him why he thinks he's competing. He said because women always keep backups. I almost laughed at how ridiculous that sounded. But he wasn't joking. He asked if I talked to multiple guys at once. I said that's normal when you're dating. He shook his head. Said not for him. I glanced at my phone again. Still no new notifications. I started wondering if he had somehow seen something else. Like maybe someone nearby had a similar phone and he got confused. But he was so certain. Too certain. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. He said next time, at least wait until I'm bound longer before texting. Next time. Like he already assumed there would be one. I said I don't think there's going to be a next time. That's when his expression changed completely. The calm, controlled look dropped. Just for a second. And underneath it was something else. Not anger exactly. More like calculation. He asked if I was ending things over a misunderstanding. I said I'm not comfortable being accused of lying about something I didn't do. He stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly nodded. Said that's disappointing. We sat in silence for maybe 10 seconds. Then my phone buzzed. I flinched. I looked down. There was a text message. From my own number. It just said, "Why did you lie?" My chest felt like it dropped into my stomach. I opened it. It was sent at 9:14 p.m. 2 minutes earlier, while he was sitting in front of me. I stared at him. He was watching my face carefully. I said this isn't funny. He tilted his head slightly. Said what isn't? I showed him the message. He barely reacted. Just glanced at it and said that's weird. My hands were shaking now. I checked the sent messages. Nothing. Just that one incoming text from my own number. I tried calling my number. It went straight to voicemail. I looked back up at him. He was calm again. Too calm. He asked if I was sure I didn't text anyone. I pushed my chair back. Said I'm leaving. He didn't try to stop me. Didn't grab my arm. Just watched. As I walked toward the stairs, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my number. You shouldn't lie on first dates. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. When I got to my car, I locked the doors and tried calling my carrier. They said there was no sign of spoofing on my account. No suspicious activity. The messages stopped after that night. But sometimes when my phone lights up unexpectedly, I still feel that same drop in my chest. Like someone's watching the reflection behind me. I've never felt trapped in a crowded room until that night. That's the part that still gets me. There were probably 50 people around us. Music playing, glasses clinking, waiters weeding through tables. It should have been the safest place to be stuck. But when she leaned in close enough for me to feel her breath near my ear and told me that if I stood up right then, she would scream, the entire restaurant might as well have been empty. I met her at a trivia night at a brewery across town. Not a romantic place. More loud and messy. Long wooden tables, exposed beams, strings of yellow lights hanging overhead. People shouting answers across the room. It felt casual, low pressure. We matched on a dating app earlier that week. She suggested trivia because she said she hates awkward silence. I thought that was smart. Less pressure to keep conversation flowing. When I walked in, she was already sitting at one of the communal tables near the back. She had claimed 2 seats and waved me over with this confident smile. She looked exactly like her photos. Blonde hair pulled into a loose bun, oversized denim jacket, small tattoo on her wrist. She looked relaxed, like she belonged there. We hugged quickly and sat down. At first, it felt easy. She was quick with answers during trivia, corrected me twice, and laughed when I got one wrong. Not in a mean way, just competitive. We ordered drinks. Mine was $7, hers was $9. She insisted on paying for the first round because she said she likes keeping things even. I thought that was cool. The first half of the night went fine. We joked about the host mispronouncing words. She told me about her job in graphic design. I told her about mine. Nothing felt off. Maybe slightly intense eye contact, but some people are just like that. Around the third round of trivia, she started asking more personal questions. Not normal stuff like siblings or hobbies. More like what scares you most. What's the worst thing someone could accuse you of? Have you ever been in trouble with the law? I laughed and said that escalated quickly. She didn't laugh. She just waited for answers. I kept it light, said I've never been arrested. Said the worst thing someone could accuse me of would probably be cheating or something. She nodded slowly, like she was storing that. The vibe shifted slightly after that. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't obvious, just subtle. She leaned closer when she talked. Her knee started touching mine under the table and she didn't move it away. At one point, I checked my phone because my friend had texted asking how the date was going. She noticed immediately. Asked who it was. I said just a friend. She asked male or female. I said male. She held my gaze a little longer than normal, then smiled. Round 4 started. People were louder now. A group at the front was almost yelling answers. That's when I felt the first weird shift. She reached across the table and touched my wrist lightly. Said she liked my watch. Her fingers lingered. Not flirtatious. More like testing something. I smiled awkwardly and pulled my hand back to grab my drink. She watched the movement closely, like she was measuring my reaction. I started thinking about leaving after the next round. Not because she'd done anything clearly wrong, just because my chest felt tight for no clear reason. I shifted in my seat and glanced toward the exit near the bar. She followed my eyes. Then she leaned in. Close enough that her hair brushed my cheek. Her voice dropped low, completely calm. She told me that if I stood up right then, she would scream. For a second, I thought she was joking. I laughed a little and said, "What?" She didn't laugh. She repeated it, softer this time. Said if I stand up, she'll scream that I touched her. My brain didn't process it immediately. The music was still playing, people still laughing around us. I looked at her face. She wasn't smiling. She looked steady, focused. I felt my stomach drop. I said that's not funny. She said she knows. She kept her voice low so no one else could hear. She said all she has to do is raise her voice and everyone in here will believe her. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I glanced around. Nobody was paying attention to us. She sat back slightly, but her knee was still pressed against mine. She said, "Relax." That word made it worse. She said she just wants to see how I handle pressure. I asked what that means. She shrugged. Said some guys get angry, some panic, some try to bargain. I felt like I was in a social experiment I didn't sign up for. I stayed seated. Didn't move. She studied my face carefully, then smiled faintly. Said, "Good." "Good what?" She said you didn't jump up. I didn't know what to say. I felt stuck. If I called her bluff and stood up, she might actually scream. And even if she didn't, the fact that she could was enough. She leaned closer again and said she's had bad dates before. Guys who lied. Guys who ghosted. Guys who thought they could just leave whenever they felt like it. Her tone wasn't emotional. It was measured. Like she was explaining rules. She said she doesn't like being abandoned mid-conversation. I said I wasn't planning to abandon anything. She tilted her head. Said you were looking at the door. She had noticed that. Every small movement. I tried to stay calm. I said I just needed some air. She said we can get air together. But not yet. The next trivia question was being read over the speakers. Nobody around us had any idea what was happening at our table. She picked up her drink and took a slow sip, eyes never leaving mine. Then she whispered that she practices different scenarios in her head, ways to keep control. That word hit me hard. Control. I asked if she does this often. She said only when she feels someone pulling away too soon. I told her we just met. She nodded. Said exactly. Another round ended. People clapped. She clapped too, like nothing was wrong. Then she leaned in again and said she's not going to scream. Not tonight. But she wanted me to understand how easy it would be. My throat felt dry. I asked why she would even think that way. She smiled faintly. Said because power shifts fast in public spaces. And she likes knowing where she stands. I realized then that this wasn't about me. It was about her needing to feel in control of every possible outcome. I stayed seated until the end of the round. When the host announced a short break, people started standing up to grab more drinks. She looked at me and said we can stand now. Like she was granting permission. I stood slowly, half expecting her to follow through. She didn't. She just watched me carefully. We walked toward the bar together. She kept close, almost glued to my side. When I ordered water instead of another drink, she raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. After a few minutes, I said I needed to head out early. She stared at me for a second, then smiled. Said okay. No threat this time. No whisper. Outside, the air felt cooler. Normal. She hugged me goodbye. Soft. Then she whispered one more thing. Said I passed. I drove home with my hands tight on the steering wheel. I unmasked her as soon as I got inside. A week later, I saw her at the same brewery. Different guy sitting across from her. She leaned in close to him, and I didn't stay long enough to see if he stood up. I knew something was wrong the second the glass hit the table in front of me. It wasn't even dramatic, just a normal bar, normal music, normal first date. But when the waiter set down a pale pink drink with a slice of lime on the rim and he looked at me like he'd just done me a favor, my stomach tightened in a way I couldn't explain yet. I hadn't ordered anything. I met him at this underground cocktail bar downtown. It's one of those places you have to walk down a narrow staircase to find. Dim lights, velvet boots, walls covered in old framed photos. It smells like citrus and wood polish. The music is low enough that you have to lean in to talk. I got there first. I always do that on first dates. I like knowing where the exits are. There was one main staircase and a smaller one near the back by the bathrooms. I noticed both before he even arrived. He walked in 5 minutes later, scanning the room until he saw me. He smiled big, confident. He looked exactly like his pictures. Clean cut, tall, button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. We hugged quickly and sat down across from each other in one of the booths. A waiter came over with menus, but he waved them away almost immediately. He said he's been there before and knows what's good. I remember feeling slightly annoyed, but I brushed it off. Some guys have to take charge. He ordered a whiskey for himself. And then he ordered something for me. Didn't look at me. Didn't ask what I liked. Just said the name of a drink I didn't recognize. The waiter nodded and left. I laughed lightly and said I usually just get something simple. He said trust me. That word always sounds heavier than it should. The drinks came quickly. His was dark and neat in a short glass. Mine was bright, almost too pretty, pinkish with crushed ice and a lime wedge. He slid it toward me. Said it's better than it looks. I took a small sip. It tasted sweet at first, then slightly bitter. Stronger than I expected. I said it's strong. He smiled and said it's supposed to be. We started talking. Normal first date stuff. Work, family, random travel stories. But he kept glancing at my drink. Not casually. More on checking progress. After a few minutes, he pointed out that I had barely touched it. I said I'm pacing myself. He leaned back and said it works better if you finish it. I laughed, thinking he meant the flavor. I asked what works better. He shrugged slightly and said the effect. That word made my chest tighten. I said I'm fine with just sipping. He didn't argue immediately. Just watched me. The music felt louder suddenly. The booth felt smaller. I took another sip, mostly because the silence felt uncomfortable. He smiled slightly when I did. He asked if I feel anything yet. I said not really, which was true. Maybe a slight warmth from the alcohol, but nothing unusual. He nodded slowly. Said give it a few minutes. I felt my skin prickle. I asked what exactly was in it. He listed off ingredients quickly. Rum, citrus, something herbal. I didn't catch all of it. I took another sip, more out of nervousness than desire. About 15 minutes in, I started feeling a little lightheaded. Not dizzy exactly. Just slightly off. I hadn't eaten much that day, so I told myself it was just hitting faster. He noticed immediately. Asked if I'm feeling it now. I said maybe a little. He leaned forward and lowered his voice. Said that's why you have to finish it. I set the glass down. Said I don't want to finish it. His smile faded slightly. Not angry. Just disappointed. He said it won't work right if you stop halfway. My heart started beating faster. I asked what won't work right. He paused for a second. Then said the bonding. Bonding. I almost laughed because it sounded ridiculous. But he was serious. He said certain drinks lower defenses. Make people more honest. More open. I stared at him. Asked if that's why he ordered it. He nodded like that was obvious. I felt a wave of cold run through me. I said it's not okay. He shrugged and said it's just a drink. Everyone drinks on dates. I glanced around the bar. Couples laughing. Friends clinking glasses. Everything looked normal, but my head felt heavier now. My thoughts slightly slower. I tried to stand up casually, said I needed the bathroom. He reached across the table and gently pushed the glass closer to me. Said finish it first. His tone wasn't loud. Just firm. I said no. He leaned back again, studying me. Said you're overreacting. I felt my hands getting clammy. I grabbed my purse and slid out of the booth. He didn't physically stop me. But as I stood, he said quietly that it's rude to waste something that expensive. I didn't ask how much it was. I didn't care if it was $18 or $30. I walked toward the bathroom. My steps felt slightly unsteady. That scared me more than anything. Inside the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and tried to breathe. I splashed water on my face. Looked at myself in the mirror. My pupils looked normal, but my head felt foggy. I checked my phone. It was 9:47 p.m. I had arrived at 8:30. It hadn't even been that long. I texted my friend and told her to call me in 5 minutes, pretending it's urgent. Then I waited. When I went back out, he was still in the booth. My drink untouched except for what I'd had. He looked annoyed now. Asked if I felt better. I said yeah. My phone rang right on cue. I answered and pretended to listen. Nodded seriously. Then told him I had to leave because of a family thing. He stared at me for a second too long. Then said that's unfortunate. As I grabbed my purse, he said quietly that it works better when both people finish theirs. Both. I looked at his glass. It was empty. Completely. I don't know if he actually drank it or not. I didn't stick around to find out. I walked up the stairs without looking back. The cool air outside hit my face and helped clear my head slightly. I sat in my car for a few minutes before driving. My phone buzzed as I pulled out of the parking lot. A message from him. You didn't give it enough time. I blocked his number before the light turned green. I don't know what was in that drink. Maybe it was just strong alcohol. Maybe I'm overthinking. But I haven't let anyone order for me since. I knew something was wrong when he corrected me about a street I've walked 100 times. It wasn't even dramatic, just a quiet sidewalk, streetlights buzzing overhead, the normal end of a first date. But the second he said I was going the wrong way to get home, my stomach dropped because I hadn't told him exactly where I live. We met at a small ramen place about 15 minutes from my apartment. Nothing fancy. Brick walls, tiny tables, loud enough that you don't have to sit in silence, but not so loud that you can't talk. I picked it because it's close to me and always busy. He seemed normal over text. Funny, slightly sarcastic, works in it. His profile pictures were basic, nothing flashy. Just him in a park, him with friends, one with a dog that wasn't his. When I walked in, he was already seated near the window. He stood up, smiled, gave me a quick hug. He smelled like clean laundry. Everything felt normal. Dinner was fine. He asked about my job. I asked about his. We joked about how overpriced everything is lately. The total came to $34, and he insisted on splitting it exactly in half down to the cents. He said he likes fairness. That word stuck with me. He asked where I parked. I said I walked. He seemed pleased with that. Said it's good to be close to things. I didn't specify how close. When we stepped outside, the air was cool and the sidewalks were still busy. People heading home, a couple walking a dog, someone skateboarding past. He said he'd walk me home. I said that's okay, it's not far. He said he doesn't mind. I didn't want to argue, and it did feel safer with someone beside me, so I nodded. We started walking north toward the main road. After about a block, I casually turned left instead of right. That's when he stopped for half a second and then gently touched my elbow. Said I usually go the other way. Usually. My brain stalled. I asked what he meant. He said if I'm heading toward the apartments near the park, the faster route is straight. My heart started beating faster. I said there are multiple ways. He smiled slightly and said sure, but that one adds 3 extra minutes. 3 extra minutes. I stared at him. I had never told him which building I live in, just that it's about 10 minutes away. I laughed it off and said I like this street better. He nodded slowly, but there was something tight in his expression. We kept walking. I felt hyper-aware of every step. After another block, I crossed the street earlier than usual, mostly because I wanted to see what he'd do. He hesitated again, then crossed too. Said that's not the most direct path. My stomach twisted. I asked how he knows. He shrugged and said he's good with maps. That didn't explain how he knew my direct path. We walked in silence for a few seconds. I could feel his eyes flicking to the buildings around us, like he was checking markers. I said casually that I sometimes switch up my route. He responded that routine is safer. Routine. That word again. He said predictable paths make it easier to spot changes. Changes like what? He said like if someone new was hanging around. The way he said it felt layered. I started realizing that he wasn't just walking me home to be polite. He was observing. We reached the small convenience store on the corner near my block. I usually turn right there. This time, I kept going straight. He stopped fully this time. Looked at me and said that's not where you turn. My chest felt tight. I asked how he would know that. He held my gaze for a second too long. Then said he's seen me before. My throat went dry. I asked where. He said around. Around isn't an answer. He clarified. At the coffee shop near my place. At the bus stop on 3rd. Once carrying groceries. My brain started racing. Those are all within a few blocks of my apartment. I said he never mentioned that. He said it never came up. That response felt deliberate. I turned left suddenly into a narrower side street that doesn't even lead directly to my building. He followed immediately. Didn't hesitate. He said this way dead ends. I said I know. He slowed slightly. Asked why we're going this way. I said because it's quiet. He didn't like that answer. I could see it in his face. The street was dimmer than the main road. Less foot traffic. Just parked cars and the hum of distant traffic. He moved slightly closer to me. Not touching, but close enough that I felt boxed in. He said he prefers sticking to well-lit routes. I said I prefer choosing my own. The air felt heavier. We reached the end of the dead-end street. I turned around. He looked almost irritated. Said now we have to go back. We walked back toward the main road. This time, he subtly guided us right instead of left. I stopped walking. Said I'm not going that way. He asked why. I said because I don't live that way. He blinked. Just once. Like his brain had to recalibrate. Then he said it's not what you told me. I felt a cold wave go through me. I said I never told you exactly where I live. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he smiled. But it wasn't relaxed anymore. It looked forced. He said maybe he assumed. Assumed based on what? He didn't answer that. We stood there under a flickering streetlight. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I said I'm going this way, and started walking toward a completely different block than where my apartment actually is. He followed at first. Then after half a block he slowed. Asked if I'm testing him. I didn't respond. He stopped walking entirely. I kept going. After a few steps, I glanced back. He was standing there watching. Not moving. Just staring. I turned the corner and ducked into a random apartment building lobby that requires a key fob. I don't live there. I just needed space. I waited inside for a few minutes, pretending to check my phone. When I peeked back out through the glass, he was gone. I didn't go home right away. I walked a long way around, doubled back twice, made sure no one was following. When I finally reached my actual building, my hands were shaking. 2 nights later, I was leaving for work early in the morning. As I stepped outside, I noticed something small on the sidewalk near the curb. A folded piece of paper, with my name on it. I don't know how he knew my last name. Inside, it just said wrong turn. I should have lied. That's the part that keeps replaying in my head. If I had just said something basic like spiders or heights or public speaking, maybe none of the rest would have happened. But she asked the question so casually, so calmly, that I didn't think twice before answering. We met at this late-night dessert place that just opened near the university. Bright neon sign, pastel walls, milkshakes piled high with whipped cream. It felt like the safest possible setting for a first date. Loud, sugary, harmless. I got there first and grabbed a small table near the window. Groups of college kids were crammed into booths, laughing too loud. Music playing from a speaker near the counter. Everything felt normal. She walked in about 5 minutes later and spotted me right away. She had long dark hair and wore a simple black jacket. She smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't a big smile. More of the quiet one that didn't fully reach her eyes. We hugged briefly and sat down. She seemed relaxed. Asked about my week. Told me about her job at a bookstore. Joked about how bad she is at cooking. Nothing felt off. We ordered milkshakes. Mine was $8. Hers was $9 because she added extra toppings. She laughed about that and said she always goes overboard. For the first 20 minutes, it was honestly easy. We talked about movies, about travel, about how weird dating apps can be. She listened closely when I talked. Not just nodding, but really paying attention. I remember thinking she seemed thoughtful. Then, halfway through her milkshake, she set the glass down carefully and asked what my biggest fear was. Just like that. No build-up. I laughed and said that's random. She shrugged slightly and said she likes real conversations. I thought about giving a joke answer, but she was looking at me so steadily that I felt weird brushing it off. So I answered honestly. I said being trapped somewhere with no control. It's something I've always hated. Elevators, small rooms, even crowded trains make me uneasy. She nodded slowly, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. Not huge, just pocket-sized. She flipped it open and clicked a pen. I laughed awkwardly and asked if she was grading me. She didn't laugh. She wrote down what I said, carefully, each word slow. Being trapped somewhere with no control. She underlined it once, then looked up at me and smiled. That smile felt different. Not amused. Not more. Just satisfied. I felt something tighten in my chest. I asked why she wrote it down. She said she likes remembering important details. I said that's specific. She nodded. Said fears tell you more than hobbies. I tried to steer the conversation somewhere lighter. Asked about her fears. She thought for a second and said she doesn't really have any. That answer felt wrong. Everyone has something. She closed the notebook but kept it on the table near her hand. Throughout the rest of the conversation, she kept glancing at it. Not obvious. Just small looks. Like checking a list. I started feeling self-conscious. Like I handed her something fragile. We finished our milkshakes, and she suggested taking a short walk since it was still early. I hesitated. But the street outside was busy. Well lit, I figured it was fine. We walked along the sidewalk toward a nearby park. The neon lights faded behind us, and the street got quieter. She walked slightly ahead of me. After a block, she slowed and matched my pace. She asked more questions. Not about movies or work. About specific situations. What would you do if you got stuck in an elevator? How long before you panic? Have you ever been locked out somewhere? I laughed nervously and said, why are we circling back to this? She said she's curious how people respond under pressure. That word again. Pressure. We reached the park entrance. It wasn't huge. Just a few benches, some trees, and a small fenced area. She suggested cutting through it as a shortcut. I didn't love the idea, but there were still a few people walking dogs. We entered. Halfway through the park, she slowed down near a small maintenance building. A concrete structure with no windows, just a metal door. I'd walked past it before. Never thought about it. She stopped near it and turned toward me. Asked if small rooms really bother me that much. I said yeah, kind of. She nodded. Then pulled out the notebook again. Opened it. Looked at the lines she wrote. Smiled faintly. Then asked if I trust her. That question made my stomach twist. I said I guess. She stepped closer to the maintenance building door. I didn't even know it was unlocked until she pulled it open slightly. It creaked. Inside was dark. Just a small storage space for park equipment. She said it would only take a minute. My chest tightened instantly. I said no. She tilted her head slightly. Said you said trapped with no control. I took a step back. She stepped forward. Not aggressively. Just calmly. Said sometimes facing fears helps. I said not like this. She didn't argue. She just stood there, holding the door open. Waiting. Like she was giving me a choice. But it didn't feel like one. The park suddenly felt emptier. Quieter. I glanced around. No one nearby anymore. She watched my face carefully. Like she was studying micro-expressions. I said I'm not going in there. She smiled softly. Said interesting. Then she closed the door slowly. Like she was tucking the idea away. We walked out of the park in silence. My heartbeat slowly returning to normal. Once we reached the main street again, she asked if I'd overreacted. I said that wasn't funny. She nodded slightly. Said that was the point. I felt cold. I asked what point. She looked at me for a long second. Then said she likes seeing where the breaking point is. I didn't know what to say. We walked back toward the dessert place where we started. When we reached the corner, she stopped. Pulled out the notebook one more time. Flipped to the page with my fear written on it. And added something beneath it. Hesitates but resists. Then she closed it and smiled at me. Said thank you for being honest. I didn't hug her goodbye. I just said I had to get going. She nodded. Didn't try to stop me. As I walked away, I felt her eyes on my back. 2 days later, I had a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a printed photo of the maintenance building door in that park. Slightly open. I knew the date was off before he even sat down. It was something about the way he stood just inside the restaurant door, scanning the room like he was counting heads. Not in a casual way either, more like he was waiting for a signal that never came. I almost pretended I hadn't seen him and walked out, but I didn't. We matched on a dating app earlier that week. He seemed normal in messages, maybe a little dry. Worked night shifts at a warehouse, liked horror movies, said he preferred quiet places over loud bars. When he suggested a small family-owned diner instead of somewhere trendy, I actually liked that. Felt simple. The diner was old school. Red vinyl booths, black and white tile floors, the kind of place that still has laminated menus. It wasn't crowded, but it wasn't empty either. A couple families, 2 older guys at the counter, a group of college kids in the corner. I was already seated in a booth near the middle when he walked in. He didn't see me right away because he paused just inside the entrance. The bell above the door jingled and he flinched slightly at the sound. Then he looked toward the back, toward the kitchen door, then toward the exit again. Only after that did he scan the booths. Our eyes met. He smiled, but it felt delayed, like he had to switch expressions. He walked over and slid into the seat across from me. We did the usual awkward hello. He looked like his pictures. Short brown hair, hoodie, tired eyes. Nothing extreme, just a regular guy. A waitress came by with water and menus. Every time the diner door opened and the bell jingled, he glanced at it immediately. Not just a quick look, a full head turn. The first time, I didn't think anything of it. Second time, same thing. Third time, I started noticing the pattern. Someone would walk in. The bell would jingle. He would look at the door. And under his breath, barely audible, he would whisper, "Not yet." At first, I thought I misheard. Maybe he said something else. But then it happened again. Door opens. Bell. His head turns. Not yet. Soft, almost like he was reminding himself. I tried to focus on conversation. Asked about his job. He answered in short sentences. Asked about mine. Nodded as I talked. But every few minutes, the bell would ring and he'd do the same thing. Look. Whisper. Not yet. My stomach started feeling tight. I asked if he was expecting someone. He blinked like he hadn't realized I noticed. Then he smiled faintly and said no. Just habit. Habit of what? He shrugged. Said he likes being aware of entrances. That sounded reasonable. Except for the whispering. Our food came. Burgers and fries. Mine was $12, his was $14 because he added bacon. We started eating. But he barely touched his food. Every time someone new came in, his fork paused midair. His eyes flicked to the door. Not yet. I heard it clearly that time. I stopped chewing. Asked what he meant. He looked at me for a second, then said nothing. I didn't believe that. About 20 minutes in, a large group walked in, loud, laughing. He went completely still. Stared at them as they found a table. I watched his face carefully. He looked tense, like he was waiting for something to happen. Then he leaned slightly forward and whispered it again. Not yet. My pulse quickened. I asked him straight up if everything was okay. He said yeah. Just timing. Timing of what? He didn't answer that. Instead, he asked me if I ever feel like something's about to happen. Like the air changes. I said sometimes before a storm. He nodded slowly. Said exactly. My chest felt heavy. Another customer walked in alone. Older woman with a purse. Bell jingled. His eyes snapped to the door. Not yet. This time louder. I stared at him. I said, "You keep saying that." He froze for half a second. Then forced a small laugh. Said it's a joke he tells himself. I asked what the punchline is. He didn't respond. Instead, he finally took a bite of his burger. Chewed slowly, like he was trying to act normal. But his eyes kept drifting toward the door. I started scanning the room myself, wondering what he was waiting for. Someone specific. A signal. A moment when the diner would be empty. Or full. I couldn't tell. About 40 minutes in, the family started leaving. The group of college kids paid their bill and headed out. Each time someone left, The bell jingled again, and each time he whispered, "Not yet." My heart was pounding now. I thought about leaving, but something kept me seated. Maybe fear of overreacting, maybe curiosity. Then the door opened again. A man walked in wearing a dark jacket and baseball cap. He paused near the entrance like he was scanning too. My date stiffened instantly. His eyes locked on the guy. For a long second, they just stared at each other across the diner. The bell stopped ringing. Silence hung heavy, and my date whispered, "Not yet" again. But this time his voice sounded different, uncertain. The man in the cap walked toward the counter and sat down, ordered coffee, acted completely normal. My date slowly relaxed back into the booth. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I asked him quietly what's going on. He leaned in closer, and for the first time, his voice dropped lower. Said he just needed the right number of witnesses. Witnesses. My blood ran cold. I said, "Witnesses for what?" He didn't answer directly. He glanced at the door again. Said, "Not enough yet." I looked around. There were maybe 8 people left inside. The waitress. The guy at the counter. 2 older men still talking. Me. Him. My brain started racing. I grabbed my purse subtly. He noticed. His eyes flicked down and then back to mine. Asked if I'm nervous. I said a little. He smiled faintly. Said, "Don't be. It's not for you." That sentence hit wrong. Another couple walked in. Bell jingled. He watched them carefully as they chose a booth near the window, counting under his breath. Then he nodded slightly to himself. Not yet. I couldn't take it anymore. I said I needed the restroom. He didn't stop me. Didn't argue. Just watched me walk away. In the restroom, I locked myself in a stall and tried to steady my breathing. I considered leaving through the back door near the kitchen. I peeked out of the bathroom slowly. He was still in the booth, staring at the entrance. I walked casually toward the counter instead of back to the booth. Told the waitress quietly that I needed to leave and asked if there was another exit. She looked confused but pointed toward the kitchen hallway. I didn't look back. I walked through the kitchen, past confused cooks, and out the back door and into the alley. I kept walking until I reached the main street. My phone buzzed 5 minutes later. A message from him. Wrong timing. I blocked his number. The next day, I saw on the news that a fight broke out at that diner late that night. No one was seriously hurt. Just chaos. I still don't know what he was waiting for, but I know he was counting. I've never seen someone look disappointed that other people knew where I was. That's the part that still creeps me out. Not anger, not panic, just this small, controlled frown like I'd ruined something she'd been hoping for. We matched on a random weeknight. Nothing special about it. She had a simple profile. Liked live music, late night drives, quiet places. She suggested we skip dinner and go somewhere more relaxed, like a 24-hour coffee spot outside the city. I hesitated at first because it was kind of far, about 25 minutes from where I live, near an industrial area that's mostly warehouses and empty lots at night, but she said it was her favorite place to think. That sentence should have made me think twice. I agreed anyway. Before I left, I did what I usually do on first dates. I texted my brother the location, her name, and told him I'd check in when I got home. I even shared my live location through my phone, not because I was scared, just habit. I pulled into the coffee shop parking lot around 9:15 p.m. The place was open but barely lit, one flickering sign outside, a few cars scattered across the lot. The surrounding buildings were dark. She was already there, sitting at one of the outdoor metal tables under a dim light. I noticed immediately how quiet it was. No traffic noise. No music. Just a faint hum of the building's air system. She stood up when she saw me and smiled. She looked exactly like her pictures. Long dark hair, oversized hoodie, boots. Nothing dramatic, just casual. We ordered drinks inside. Mine was $5. Hers was $6 because she added an extra shot of espresso. Then we went back outside to sit. The first 10 minutes were normal. She asked about work. I asked about her hobbies. She talked about liking places that feel empty. Said crowded areas make her anxious. I joked that this place definitely qualifies as empty. She smiled at that. Then she asked if I come here often. I said no, this is my first time. She nodded like she already knew that. We sat there in the cool night air, steam rising from our cups. After a while, she asked what kind of precautions I take when meeting someone new. The question caught me off guard. I laughed and said basic stuff. Public places, telling a friend. She tilted her head slightly. Asked if anyone knew exactly where I was right now. Her tone was calm, casual. I said yeah. My brother has my location. I said it lightly, like it was no big deal. Her expression changed immediately. Not dramatically. Just a slight tightening around her eyes. A small frown. Almost disappointed. She asked if he checks it often. I shrugged and said probably not unless I don't respond. She looked down at her cup for a second, then back at me. Asked how long it takes before someone would worry. I said maybe an hour if I didn't text back. She nodded slowly. I felt a strange tension building in my chest. I tried to keep things light. Asked why she was curious. She said she likes to know how connected people are. That phrase stuck with me. Connected. I said I guess pretty connected. She leaned back in her chair. Looked around the empty lot. Then back at me. Said it must be hard to disappear when people track you. My stomach dropped slightly. I laughed awkwardly and said I'm not planning to disappear. She didn't laugh. Just watch me. A car drove past on the road beyond the parking lot. Headlights sweeping across us for a second. She glanced at it, then back at me. Asked if my brother would notice if I turned off my location. I said yeah. Probably. Her jaw tightened slightly. Then she forced a small smile. Said that's smart. Smart. But it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like an obstacle. I took a sip of my drink to give myself a second. The air felt colder now. I noticed how far the nearest street light was from where we were sitting. I casually pulled my phone out and checked it. Still sharing location. Battery at 62%. She noticed. Asked if I'm checking in. I said just checking the time. She nodded slowly. Then asked if I always tell someone when I'm out late. I said usually. She leaned forward slightly. Rested her elbows on the table. Asked if I'd still have come tonight if I hadn't told anyone. That question made my heart beat faster. I said probably. She studied my face carefully, like she was searching for doubt. I suddenly became hyper-aware of how isolated we were. The coffee shop windows behind us were tinted dark. Inside, I could barely see one employee wiping down the counter. No other customers. Just us. She asked if I trust her. I said we just met. She smiled faintly. Said exactly. There was a pause that felt heavier than it should have. Then she asked what my biggest risk ever was. I said I'm not sure. She said meeting her here might count. My throat went dry. I said I told someone where I was. She frowned again. Slightly deeper this time. Said that complicates things. Complicates what? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked how precise the location sharing is. I said pretty precise. Like within a few feet. She leaned back again. Looked toward the dark warehouse across the lot. Then back at me. Asked if I'd mind turning it off for a bit, just to see how it feels. My stomach tightened fully now. I said no. She didn't argue. Just watched me closely. Then she asked how often my brother checks in. I said only if I don't respond. She nodded slowly. Then asked what would happen if my phone died. I said I'd text him before it did. She seemed to be calculating something in her head. Then she sighed softly, almost frustrated. Said she prefers when people are more independent. I said independent how? She said unattached. That word hit wrong. I realized then that she wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was measuring, looking for gaps, weak spots. I stood up slowly. Said I think I'm going to head out. She didn't try to stop me. Just looked disappointed again. Like I failed some quiet test. As I walked toward my car, I felt her eyes on my back. I didn't run. But I didn't take my time either. I got inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was still sitting at the table, staring at her phone. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A message from her. Next time, don't tell anyone. I blocked her before I reached the highway. When I got home, my brother texted asking if everything went okay. I stared at the message for a long second, then typed back that yeah, it did. But I didn't sleep much that night, because I kept thinking about that frown. I didn't realize I was being tested until she thanked me for passing. That's the only way I can explain it now. The whole night felt normal at first, maybe a little quirky, but normal enough that I ignored the small things. By the time she leaned back in her chair, looked at me calmly, and thanked me for being cooperative, I was already too deep into whatever she had planned. We met at a late-night board game cafe on the east side of town. Not the trendy part. More like an old mall that had been half renovated. The cafe stayed open until 1 a.m. and had shelves stacked with card games and strategy games. Dim lights, mismatched couches, people hunched over tables arguing about rules. She picked the place. Said she liked seeing how people handle losing. I laughed when she said that. Thought it was just a competitive streak. She was already inside when I got there, sitting at a small table near the back. She had a game box open in front of her, pieces already set up neatly. She looked like her pictures. Dark hair, oversized sweater. She smiled when she saw me, but it was controlled, like she was measuring the exact amount of warmth to show. We hugged briefly and sat down. She said she'd already chosen a game because it requires strategy and patience. I shrugged and said sure. The first round was simple enough. Moving pieces across a small board, trying to block each other. She watched me more than she watched the board. Every time I hesitated, she noticed. Every time I made a move quickly, she raised an eyebrow. After about 20 minutes, she said I'm calmer than most. I asked what that meant. She said most guys get frustrated by this point. By what point? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she rearranged the board and suggested a different game. This one had cards with scenarios on them. Hypothetical situations where you choose how to react. At first, they were harmless. You're late to work and your boss is angry. Your friend cancels plans last minute. Stuff like that. But then the cards shifted. You're accused of something you didn't do. You're cornered in a room with no exit. You realize someone has been watching you for weeks. She asked me how I'd respond to each. I tried to keep it light. Logical answers. Stay calm. Talk it out. Assess options. She nodded approvingly. Said that's good. Good for what? She smiled slightly. Said for later. I felt a small twist in my stomach. I brushed it off again. Told myself she's just in psychology or something. Around 10:30 p.m., the cafe started emptying out. Only a few tables left occupied. The staff looked tired. She suggested we move to a quieter corner. We shifted to a couch area near the back wall, partially hidden by a tall shelf of games. Less visible from the main entrance. That detail didn't hit me until later. She pulled out her phone and placed it face down on the table. Then she asked if I trusted her. That question again. I laughed and said we just met. She said trust builds quickly in controlled settings. Controlled. That word felt intentional. She asked if I would mind putting my phone on the table too. I hesitated for half a second, but did it. She didn't ask me to turn it off, just to place it there. Then she reached across and gently slid both our phones out of arm's reach. Not far. Just enough that standing up would be noticeable. I felt my chest tighten slightly. I asked what she was doing. She said reducing distractions. Then she asked me to close my eyes for a moment. I almost said no, but I didn't. I closed them. I heard her moving slightly, maybe shifting on the couch. I waited. After maybe 10 seconds, she told me to open them. When I did, she was holding something small and metallic in her hand. A pair of handcuffs. Not the fluffy kind. Real ones. My brain lagged for a second. I thought maybe it was a joke. She noticed the change in my expression immediately. She said, "Relax." That word again. She said they're just a prop. A trust exercise. I laughed awkwardly and said that's a weird first date activity. She tilted her head. Said most men panic by this point. I swallowed. She wasn't smiling. She looked genuinely curious about my reaction. I said, "I'm not panicking." She nodded slowly. Said, "I can see that." Then she placed the cuffs on the table between us. Not touching me. Just there. She asked if I would let her cuff one wrist lightly just to see how I handle it. My heart started pounding harder. I said, "I don't think that's a good idea." She leaned back, studying me. Said, "Interesting." I asked, "What's interesting?" She said the ones who refuse immediately usually have control issues. The ones who agree too fast usually crave dominance. And the ones who hesitate but stay calm are the most cooperative. Cooperative. She said it like it was a compliment. I felt my throat go dry. I said, "I'm not here for some experiment." She didn't deny it. She just looked at me steadily. Then she did something that made my stomach drop. She picked up the cuffs and attached one side loosely around her own wrist. Left the other side open. Then she slid closer on the couch. Close enough that our shoulders touched. She asked if I would just hold the other cuff for a second. Not even put it on. Just hold it. I don't know why I did. Maybe because she wasn't physically restraining me. Maybe because it still felt like a game. I took the open cuff in my hand. She watched my face carefully. Then she leaned in slightly and whispered that most men panic by this point. I froze. Her voice was calm. Steady. Like she was narrating data. She said they either try to pull away or joke too loudly or called it crazy. But I was just sitting there, holding the metal cuff. She smiled faintly. Thanked me for being cooperative. That word hit different now. It didn't feel like praise. It felt like confirmation. I slowly set the cuff back on the table. Said, "I'm not comfortable with this." She didn't argue. She simply unlocked the cuff from her wrist and placed both on the table again. Then she said that's okay. The real test already happened. My stomach twisted. I asked what test. She said seeing how long it takes before someone realizes they're being assessed. I looked around the cafe. 2 employees at the counter. A couple near the entrance. Nobody paying attention to us. She leaned back into the couch cushions, completely relaxed. Said she studies behavioral responses. In real environments. I asked if that's what tonight was. She nodded slightly. Said I passed certain markers. Remained calm. Didn't escalate. Didn't draw attention. I felt anger creeping in under the fear. I said I didn't agree to be part of anything. She shrugged lightly. Said participation is often unconscious. That sentence made my skin crawl. I stood up. Slowly. Carefully. She didn't scream. Didn't grab me. She just watched. Then she smiled and said, "Thank you for your time." Like we just completed a survey. I grabbed my phone and walked toward the exit. I didn't look back. When I reached the parking lot, my hands were shaking. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Just the time. 12:14 a.m. 2 days later, I got an email from an unknown address. No subject line. Just one sentence. Cooperation noted. I should have left when he said he likes to document everything. At the time, it just sounded like one of those harmless quirks. Some people journal. Some people take too many photos of their food. I didn't think it meant he had an actual system. We met at a small art gallery that also doubles as a wine bar at night. It's in an older part of town, brick buildings, narrow sidewalks, street lights that flicker when the wind picks up. He suggested it because he said he likes first dates somewhere quiet enough to talk, but interesting enough to observe people. That word observe stuck with me later. When I walked in, he was standing near one of the paintings, hands in his pockets, studying it like he was actually analyzing brush strokes. He looked like his pictures. Tall, thin, dark hair pushed back neatly. He smiled when he saw me and gave me a quick hug. The place wasn't crowded. Maybe 10 other people scattered around. Soft jazz playing in the background. Dim lighting that made everything look warmer than it probably was. We ordered wine. Mine was $11. His was $13 because he picked a different blend. We stood near the wall at first, talking about the art. He seemed smart, calm, very deliberate with his words. He asked a lot of questions. Not just surface stuff like what I do for work. More like, what do I look for in people? What's something that makes me uncomfortable? How quickly do I trust someone? I answered casually at first. He listened closely. Nodded a lot. His eyes never really wandered. They stayed locked on me like he was trying to memorize every detail. After about 40 minutes, he suggested we sit down at one of the small tables near the back. We moved to a corner table partially hidden by a tall sculpture, less visible from the main floor. I didn't think much of it at the time. We kept talking. He asked about my last relationship, how it ended, what I learned from it. Then he said something that felt strange. He said he likes to compare notes. I laughed and asked what that meant. He reached down beside his chair and pulled up a slim black folder, like something he'd bring to a meeting. My stomach tightened a little. I asked what that was. He said it helps him track patterns. Then he opened it. Inside were printed photographs, stacked neatly in clear sleeves. I felt my pulse jump. He pulled one out and placed it on the table between us. It was a photo of him sitting across from a woman at what looked like a coffee shop. The angle was slightly off-center, like it was taken from distance. I looked closer. The woman looked unaware, mid-laugh. I asked if that was a friend. He said it was a first date from last year. I stared at the photo, asked who took it. He smiled faintly. Said he sets up his phone beforehand sometimes. My chest felt tight. He flipped to the next photo. Another woman. Different location. This time in a restaurant. Same angle. Him across from her. Her face visible. Unaware. I asked why he keeps these. He said documentation is important. He flipped through more. Coffee shops. Parks. Bars. Each one clearly a first date setting. Each one showing him sitting across from a different woman. Same body posture. Same slight tilt of his head. The women looked normal. Smiling. Talking. Completely unaware they were being photographed. I felt a wave of cold move through me. I asked if they knew he was taking pictures. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked if I noticed the pattern. I looked at him, then back at the photos. I didn't want to look too long, but I did. In every photo, the woman was sitting in the same position, slightly leaning forward, hands near the table, and in every photo, there was a small object placed near the edge of the table. A phone, positioned at a similar angle. My stomach dropped. I looked up at him. He smiled softly, asked if I see it now. I swallowed and said, see what? He tapped one of the photos lightly, said they all lean in around the same time. I felt my breathing get shallow. He said around the 45-minute mark, most people relax. Start sharing more personal things. Lean closer. Lower their guard. He said it's predictable. Predictable. I glanced at our table. My phone was sitting near the edge, screen down. I moved it slightly away from the center. He noticed. His eyes flicked down and then back to me. He asked if that made me uncomfortable. I said a little. He nodded. Said that's good. Good how? He flipped to the last sleeve in the folder. It was empty. Just a blank plastic sheet. He looked at me, then at the empty space, then back at me. Asked if I noticed anything else. My heart was pounding now. I said no. He leaned in slightly. Said the dates usually don't last past this point. I asked what point. He said the moment they realize they're being studied. Studied. That word hit heavy. I asked what happens after that. He shrugged lightly. Said they leave. I almost stood up right then. But something about the way he was watching me made me hesitate. Like he was waiting to see if I'd follow the same pattern. I asked why he does this. He said because patterns reveal truth. He said he likes to see if someone deviates, if someone reacts differently. I felt like my skin was crawling. I said this feels invasive. He didn't deny it. He just said most people say that. Most people. He closed the folder slowly and placed it back beside his chair. Then he leaned back and crossed his arms. Said so. Will you follow the pattern? My mind was racing. I said I don't know what you mean. He smiled faintly. Said most women stand up right about now. I felt the urge to prove him wrong. To not be predictable. But my body was already tense. My hand was already reaching for my purse. He noticed that too. His eyes tracked the movement. He said there it is. Almost satisfied. I stood up. I didn't say anything dramatic. Just that I needed to go. He nodded calmly. Like he expected it. As I walked toward the exit, I felt his gaze on my back. When I reached the door, I glanced back once. He was sitting there, hands folded on the table. Calm. Almost pleased. 2 days later, I got a message from an unknown email address. No greeting. Just an image attached. It was a photo of me. Sitting across from him. Leaning slightly forward. Mid-sentence. I should have taken the hint when she said she values closure more than anything. We were barely 10 minutes into the date when she dropped that line, and at the time it just sounded like one of those trendy opinions people post about. No ghosting. Communicate your feelings. Be mature. I even agreed with her. I hate ghosting too. It feels weak. Childish. I didn't know she meant something else entirely. We met at a small sushi place tucked between a laundromat and a pharmacy. It wasn't fancy. Just dim lights, a lawn counter, and a few booths near the back. I picked it because it's always busy enough to feel safe, but not loud enough to shout. She was already there, sitting in a booth against the wall. She looked exactly like her pictures. Short black hair, subtle makeup, oversized sweater. She had this calm look, almost bored, like she'd been waiting longer than she had. We hugged briefly and sat down. At first, everything felt normal. She asked about my job. I asked about hers. She worked remote doing customer support for a tech company. Said she spends most days alone in her apartment. I made a joke about going stir crazy. She smiled and said she doesn't mind being alone. That should have stuck out more. We ordered sushi. Mine was $18. Hers was $21 because she added an extra roll. We split it evenly. She insisted on exact numbers. Said she doesn't like owing anyone anything. Conversation flowed easily at first. She laughed at the right moments. Maintained steady eye contact. Nothing weird. About 30 minutes in, she brought up dating history. Not in a casual way. She asked how I usually end things with someone if I'm not feeling it. I said I try to be honest. She nodded approvingly. Then she said she hates ghosting. The way she said it felt heavier than the topic required. I agreed. Said it's immature. She leaned back slightly and studied my face. Asked if I've ever ghosted someone. I admitted that once or twice when I was younger I probably faded out instead of having a hard conversation. She nodded slowly. Then she said she doesn't tolerate that anymore. Her tone wasn't emotional. It was flat. Controlled. I thought she meant she just blocks people who ghost. So I asked what she does instead. She smiled faintly. Said she makes sure they understand the consequences. That word made my stomach tighten a little. Consequences. I laughed awkwardly and said like, what, you send a long text? She didn't laugh. She leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on the table. And then she started describing what happened to the last guy who tried. She said his name was Jared. They went on 2 dates. On the 3rd week, he stopped replying. Left her on red. She said she waited 3 days before doing anything. I asked what she did. She said she drove to his apartment complex. My chest tightened slightly. She said she just wanted to talk. She described how she waited in her car until he came home from work, how she watched him carry groceries inside, how she timed how long it took him to walk his dog. She spoke calmly, like she was recounting a grocery list. I asked if he knew she was there. She shook her head slightly, said not at first. Then she described how she left a note on his car windshield. Not threatening, just detailed, listing the times he'd been home that week, the exact hour he turned his lights off, the fact that he forgets to lock his balcony door sometimes. My heart was beating faster now. I asked what happened next. She said he texted immediately, apologized, said he was just busy. She said she agreed to meet him one more time, to talk. I felt trapped listening, like I was already too invested in the story. She said during that last meeting, she explained that disappearing without explanation makes people anxious. And she doesn't like being anxious. She said she wanted him to feel that same anxiety. So she described everything she knew about his routine, the places he stops after work, the coffee shop he visits on Tuesdays, the gym schedule. She said he went pale. I believe that. I probably would too. I asked what happened after that. She smiled softly, said he never ghosted anyone again. I said, how do you know? She shrugged, said she keeps tabs sometimes. My mouth felt dry. She took a sip of water and watched me carefully, like she was measuring my reaction. I tried to play it cool. Said that's intense. She tilted her head slightly. Said intense how? I said driving to someone's place feels like crossing the line. She didn't argue. Just said being ignored crosses a line too. Her logic felt circular, but she said it so calmly that it was hard to challenge directly. I asked if she's ever had to do that more than once. She smiled again. Said patterns repeat. Patterns. That word again. She asked if I would ever ghost her. The question felt like a test. I said I wouldn't. She nodded. Said good. Then she leaned closer and lowered her voice slightly. Said she doesn't like being left without answers. And she doesn't like unfinished things. Unfinished things. I felt the weight of that. Like she was already warning me. The rest of dinner felt different. Every time I glanced at my phone, she noticed. Every time the waiter came by, she paused conversation and watched my body language. I realized she wasn't just telling a story. She was setting rules. By the time the check came, I felt drained. We stood up to leave. Outside, the street was quiet. She hugged me longer than necessary. Then she whispered that honesty is always better. I nodded. Said yeah. I drove home feeling uneasy. That night, she texted saying she had a good time. I replied politely. Over the next few days, she texted consistently. Nothing extreme. Just regular conversation. But something about it felt monitored. I started feeling less interested. Not because she was obviously crazy, but because the story of Jared kept replaying in my head. After a week, I slowed down my replies. Not full ghosting, just less frequent. She noticed immediately. Asked if something changed. I said I've been busy. She replied that busy is vague. My stomach dropped. I decided to be direct. Told her I didn't feel a connection. Wished her well. She responded with a thumbs up. Nothing else. For 2 days, silence. I thought maybe it ended normally. Then, on the third night, I came home from work and saw something on my car windshield. A folded piece of paper. My heart started racing before I even opened it. Inside, there was no threat. Just a list. The time I left for work that morning. The coffee shop I stopped at. The exact minute I came home. At the bottom, one sentence. Thank you for not ghosting. I knew my shiv left when he checked his watch the third time and didn't look at me once while doing it. It wasn't the checking that bothered me. It was the way he looked at the time like it mattered more than the conversation. Like the night was running on a schedule I wasn't aware of. We met at a small tapas bar downtown. Not crowded, but not empty either. Warm lights hanging low over wooden tables, soft music in the background, the kind of place people pick when they want it to feel intentional but not too romantic. He suggested it because he said he likes places where things come out slowly. Small plates, timed out. He said pacing matters. That word stuck with me later. I got there a few minutes early and grabbed the table near the wall. I like having a clear view of exits. The main door was straight ahead, and there was a side hallway that probably led to the kitchen and bathrooms. He walked in right at 7 o'clock p.m. Not 6:59, not 7:1. Exactly 7 o'clock. He smiled when he saw me. He looked like his pictures. Neatly styled hair, button-up shirt, watch on his wrist that caught the light every time he moved. We hugged quickly and sat down. The first 20 minutes were easy. He was funny in a dry way. Asked about my job. Told me about his. He worked in project management and said he likes structure. Likes knowing how things are supposed to unfold. We ordered a few plates. Mine totaled about $24, his about $26. He insisted we split evenly again, said fairness keeps things clean. Clean. Another word that stayed with me. As we ate, he asked a lot of questions. Not invasive at first, just detailed. What time do you usually wake up? How long does it take you to get ready? Do you prefer routine or spontaneity? I answered casually, thinking he was just trying to get to know me. Every so often, he glanced at the door. Not nervously, just checking. After about an hour, I started feeling that subtle shift in my energy. The kind where you know you're ready to wrap things up. Nothing dramatic, just tired. It had been a long week. I glanced at my phone to check the time. 9:14 p.m. I said I should probably head out soon since I had an early morning. That's when his expression changed. Not angry, just tight, controlled. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me carefully. Asked why so soon. I said it's been a couple hours. He shook his head slightly. Said it's only been 2. Only. Like that wasn't enough. I laughed lightly and said that's pretty standard for a first date. He didn't laugh. He leaned forward slowly, resting his forearms on the table. Lowered his voice just enough that I had to lean in to hear him. And that's when he said if I leave before he's ready, it gets complicated. My stomach dropped so fast, it almost felt physical. I asked what he meant. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just held my gaze. Said that he doesn't like abrupt endings. Said when things stop before their natural point, they unravel. Unravel. My chest felt tight. I said I'm just going home. He nodded slowly. Said he knows. But timing matters. He glanced at his watch again. I realized then that he wasn't just checking the time randomly. He was waiting for something. I asked what happens at his natural point. He tilted his head slightly. Said closure. I said what kind of closure. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked if I trust him. That question always feels like a trap. I said we just met. He smiled faintly. Said exactly. Then he leaned even closer. Close enough that I could feel his breath near my ear. And repeated that if I leave before he's ready, it gets complicated. His tone wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. That almost made it worse. It was calm. Matter of fact. Like he was explaining a rule. I leaned back in my seat. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I glanced around the bar. A couple at the next table was laughing. The bartender was wiping glasses. Everything looked normal. I said I don't understand what you're implying. He leaned back slowly this time. Said he's implying nothing. Just that unfinished things tend to circle back. Circle back. I felt trapped in the booth even though I wasn't physically blocked. I grabbed my purse subtly. He noticed immediately. His eyes flicked down and then back up. Asked if I'm feeling rushed. I said I just have an early morning. He looked at his watch again. 9:21 p.m. Said give it 9 more minutes. 9. Why 9? He didn't answer. Just said he prefers round numbers. My mind was racing. I considered standing up anyway. But something about the way he was watching me made me hesitate. Like he was measuring my defiance. I forced a small smile and said fine. 9 minutes. He nodded once. Seemed satisfied. The next few minutes felt longer than the previous 2 hours combined. He went back to casual conversation. Asked about movies. About weekend plans. Like nothing had happened. But every 30 seconds, he glanced at his watch. I watched it too. 9:24. 9:26. 9:28. My pulse was steady but fast. At 9:29, he straightened slightly. At 9:30 exactly, he relaxed. Visibly. Like a switch flipped. He leaned back and smiled fully for the first time that night. Said now it's fine. Fine how? He said now if you leave, it ends clean. I stared at him. Asked what would have happened at 9:21. He shrugged. Said it would have felt incomplete. I asked incomplete how. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up. Said he'll walk me out. We stepped outside into the cool night air. The street was quieter now. Less foot traffic. He walked beside me toward my car. Not too close, but close enough. When we reached it, he stopped. Looked at me carefully, and said timing is everything. I forced a polite smile and said good night. I got into my car and locked the doors immediately. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. He was standing there looking at his watch again. The next day, I checked my phone around 9:21 p.m. without meaning to, just to see. There was a missed call from an unknown number. Timestamped 9:21. I should have left when she said there was no version of tonight where we didn't end up together. She said it like it was comforting, like it took the pressure off. Like no matter what I said or did, the outcome was already decided. At first, I thought she was just romantic in a dramatic way. Some people believe in fate, soulmates, coincidence meaning something bigger. I don't judge that, but the way she explained it made my chest feel tight in a way I couldn't ignore. We met at a small rooftop garden bar attached to a boutique hotel. Not super fancy, but quiet. Plants hanging from the ceiling, soft lighting, city skyline glowing in the distance. It felt safe. Open air, lots of people around. She was already sitting at a corner table when I arrived. She looked exactly like her pictures. Long light brown hair, simple dress, calm smile. She stood up and hugged me like we'd known each other longer than a week of texting. We ordered drinks. Mine was $14. Hers was $16 because she added something extra. She paid for her own without hesitation. Said she doesn't believe in debt between people. That sentence stuck with me later. The first half hour was easy. She talked about astrology, about how she reads birth charts for fun. I joked about not knowing my rising sign. She laughed and said she'd already looked it up. I asked how. She smiled and said she only needed my birthday and approximate time. Said she estimated based on where I grew up. I laughed awkwardly and said that's a lot of effort. She said effort matters when something is meant to be. That was the first time she used that phrase. Meant to be. She leaned back and looked at me carefully. Said this date couldn't fail. I asked what she meant. She said fate already lined it up. I smiled politely and said that's optimistic. She shook her head slowly. Said not optimistic. Inevitable. My stomach tightened slightly. She started listing small coincidences. How we matched on the same day the moon shifted signs. How we both grew up in towns near water. How we both have siblings with similar age gaps. At first, it felt like she was stretching, but then she mentioned something more specific. She said we both moved to this city the same year. I hadn't told her that directly. I asked how she knew. She said it was in an old social media post from years ago. She said it casually, like it was normal to scroll that far back. I nodded slowly, trying not to overreact. She leaned forward slightly. Said she ran the numbers. My heart skipped. I asked what numbers. She said our birth dates, times, locations. Said statistically, the chance of us sitting at this exact table at this exact time was incredibly low. I laughed lightly. Said that's how probability works. She didn't laugh. She said low probability events are proof of design. Design. She was serious. She started explaining how every past relationship of hers had ended because the alignment was wrong. Wrong timing. Wrong chart. Wrong energy. But this time, everything aligned. She said she double-checked. Double-checked what? She said the compatibility, the long-term outlook, the way our lives would intersect. She said this date couldn't fail because it already happened in a way. That sentence hit me wrong. I asked what that meant. She smiled softly. Said she's had dreams about this exact moment. Same rooftop. Same drinks. Same conversation. My pulse quickened. I asked when she had these dreams. She said weeks ago. Before we even matched. That didn't make sense. She explained that she saw a version of me in her dream. Described what I was wearing. Dark jacket. Light shirt. I looked down on myself. That's what I was wearing. I told myself that's generic. Most guys wear that. She said in the dream. I hesitated before smiling. She mimicked my exact hesitation from earlier. I felt cold. I asked if she believes dreams predict reality. She said not predict. Confirm. She said fate gives hints. And she pays attention. I glanced toward the exit stairs. She noticed immediately. Her eyes followed mine. She smiled again. Said there's no need to rush. This is where you're supposed to be. That sentence made my chest feel tight. I said supposed to according to who? She said the pattern. There it was again. Pattern. She pulled her phone out and opened her notes app. Showed me a list. Dates. Locations. Descriptions. She said she writes down impressions after every significant dream. I scrolled through a few entries. Most were vague. But one from 3 weeks ago mentioned rooftop garden. City lights. Man with dark jacket. I swallowed. I asked if she does this often. She said only when something feels important. She said she felt it when she saw on a profile. Like recognition. Like remembering something she'd forgotten. I tried to keep my voice steady. Said sometimes recognition is just familiarity. She shook her head. Said this is different. She leaned closer. Said if I try to leave early, something will interrupt. Interrupt how? She shrugged slightly. Said circumstances always adjust to keep things on track. I forced a small laugh. Said that sounds intense. She didn't laugh. She said you'll see. Right then, a waiter accidentally bumped into our table. Her drink nearly tipped. She steadied it calmly. Looked at me. And said see. My heart was pounding now. I told myself it was coincidence. Just a crowded rooftop. But she looked satisfied. Like the universe had just proven her point. I said I actually got an early morning and might head out soon. She didn't look upset. Just curious. Asked if I really believe that's my choice. My stomach twisted. I said of course it is. She smiled softly. Said if you leave now, something will bring you back. The confidence in her voice made my skin crawl. I stood up anyway. Said I had a nice time. She remained seated. Calm. Said this isn't goodbye. Not in a threatening way. Just certain. I walked for the stairs. Half expecting something dramatic. Nothing happened. I reached the street. The night air felt cooler. Normal. I got into my car and drove home. On the way, my phone buzzed. A notification from the dating app. It showed that we had matched exactly 1 month ago. To the minute. I stared at the timestamp. I hadn't noticed that before. Another buzz. A message from her. I knew you'd check. I knew something was wrong long before we reached my building, but I couldn't figure out exactly what until it was almost midnight and my hand was shaking over my own doorknob. It started out so normal that I still feel stupid replaying it. We met at a small late-night arcade bar near campus. Loud, bright lights, old pinball machines, groups of friends crowding around air hockey tables. It felt impossible for anything bad to happen in a place that chaotic. He seemed normal over messages. Dry humor into video games. Works remote in software. Nothing intense. No red flags. He didn't double text. Didn't overshare. Just casual. When I walked in, he was leaning against one of the machines scrolling on his phone. He looked up, smiled, waved. Average height, dark jacket, clean haircut. He looked like every other guy in that place. We hugged quickly and started playing a few games. He was competitive but not aggressive about it. Teased me lightly when I lost. Bought the first round of drinks. Mine was $9, his was $11. He joked that the bartender overpoured his. Everything felt fine. After about an hour, we moved to a quieter corner with a small table near the wall. Less noise, easier to talk. He asked about my job, my roommates, where I live. I kept it general. Just said I'm a few blocks away. He nodded like that was convenient. Around 11 p.m., I said I was getting tired and should head home. He offered to walk me. I hesitated for a second, but it was only a few blocks and the streets were still busy enough. So I said okay. We stepped outside into the cool air. The noise from the arcade faded behind us. The streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk. We started walking. At first, he was relaxed, hands in his pockets, talking about random stuff. But every time we passed a side street or alley, he glanced at it briefly. Not nervously, just checking. I noticed but didn't say anything. Halfway to my building, he asked if I always walk this road. I said usually. He nodded. Asked if I ever switch it up. I shrugged and said sometimes. He smiled faintly. Said routine can make things predictable. That word made my stomach tighten. Predictable. I laughed lightly and said predictable is safe. He looked at me for a second longer than necessary. Said sometimes. We turned the corner onto my block. It's quieter than the main road. Mostly apartment buildings and parked cars. One street light flickers near the middle. As we walked, I started feeling that subtle sense of being watched. Not by him exactly. Just the environment. Too quiet. He slowed slightly as we got closer to my building. Asked if I live alone. I said I have a roommate. That's not true anymore, but I didn't feel like explaining. He nodded thoughtfully. We reached my front steps. I felt relief just seeing the familiar door. I turned to say goodnight. That's when his expression changed. It wasn't dramatic. He just smiled calmly. And as I reached for my keys, he leaned slightly closer and said, "Relax." This is usually where they realize it's too late. My entire body went cold. I froze with my key halfway to the lock. I asked what he meant. His smile didn't fade. He said most of them don't notice until the door. Most of them. My heart started pounding so hard it felt like it was in my throat. I asked most of who. He shrugged slightly. Said dates. Like this. My hand tightened around my keys. I said that's not funny. He didn't laugh. He just stood there looking at me calmly. Then he said it's interesting how people feel safe when they're almost home. Almost. I realized then that we were standing on the top step. The door behind me. Him between me and the sidewalk. The street was empty. No one walking by. I forced my voice steady and asked what exactly he was implying. He tilted his head slightly. Said nothing bad. Just that by the time they're at the door, they've already told me enough. Told him enough what? He listed things quietly. My work schedule. The fact that I usually order groceries on Sunday mornings. That I take this route most nights. My chest tightened. I never told him about groceries. I asked how he knew that. He shrugged. Said patterns. I felt a wave of fear rush through me. I said, "You don't know me like that." He smiled softly. Said, "I know more than you think." I finally got my key into the lock. My hands were shaking. He didn't try to grab me. Didn't block the door. He just stood there. Watching. Calm. I turned the key and opened the door quickly. Stepped inside. He stayed on the step. Didn't follow. Before I could close it fully, he said, "Don't worry. It's not tonight." That sentence made my blood run cold. I slammed the door shut and locked it, then locked the deadbolt, then leaned against it, breathing hard. I waited, listened. No knocking. No footsteps. After a full minute, I looked through the small window beside the door. He was still standing there, looking at the building. Not at his phone. Not around. Just at the door. After another few seconds, he turned and walked down the steps calmly, like nothing happened. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I checked my phone. No messages from him. Nothing weird. I told myself maybe it was just a strange comment. Maybe I overreacted. 3 days later, I came home from work and found something sitting on the small table just inside my door. A folded piece of paper. I don't remember leaving anything there. I opened it slowly. Inside, there was one sentence. Next time, don't wait until the door.